So what we want to do is cultivate cultivate a capacity for kindness. So, close your eyes. Take a few moments to breathe in and breathe out. Let the Helicopium stream begin. How y'all doing, chat? Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alok Kanoja. A reminder that although I am a psychiatrist, nothing we discuss on stream today is intended to be taken as medical advice. And yeah, everything is for educational purposes only. Very true for today. So we're going to be talking a little bit about crypto psychology. And also, if y'all have a concern or question, please go see a licensed professional. Yo, first-time chatter MV Darwin, welcome. First-time chatter Bob Sasquatch. No entertainment today? Oh, no, I don't think so, my friend. What up? Thanks for the gifted subs, Tough Dev. Really appreciate it. How y'all doing? Okay, so we've got some fun stuff for y'all today. So, you know, we've been trying to engage with the community a little bit more, and that's great. So, couple of things. So we do our stream. So someone had a great idea on I think yesterday. So we were supposed to have the Surgeon General on today, but I'm sure y'all can imagine he's busy. So hopefully that'll happen at some point. And so we were trying to figure out, okay, so like, what are we going to do today? Because like, you know, that sort of fell through. And so we just posted on our Twitter asking people for like questions on mental health. And what we're going to do, thankfully, because we had no idea what to do or what to talk about, people, asked a lot of questions. So we're going to be going through Twitter today and just answering all kinds of questions. So this is going to be a little bit different from when we do like subreddit posts and things like that, because those tend to be like a little bit more in-depth and kind of like thought out or comprehensive. We really try to explain things in detail. Whereas today, since we've got a bunch of Twitter posts, I mean, maybe it'll end up into lectures, but I think it's going to be like a little bit more, kind of like Dr. K, unprepared, just knee-jerk kind of responses to things. And one of the posts was about crypto and crypto losses. So I thought I'd opine on crypto, which is actually something I could talk for a very, very long time about. But we're going to sort of offer some general thoughts, some introductory stuff about crypto psychology, I think, for lack of a better term. So like, it's interesting because if you understand principles of psychology and human behavior and you can understand a lot of what's going on in crypto. And I think what a lot of people don't realize in crypto is that, you can do as much analytics as you want to, but at the end of the day, the decisions that you make in crypto are based on your brain. And if they're based on your brain, they're going to be like vulnerable to cognitive biases. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about cognitive biases and other kinds of like technology's impact or interface with psychology, which is something that, we're getting more and more information about. So I've actually been reading papers on the psychology of cryptocurrency for like a year now. And so I have a lot of interesting thoughts on the matter. So we're gonna, maybe y'all will find them interesting, maybe you won't. We'll see. So we're going to talk a little bit about the recent losses in crypto and sort of like what to do about it. Some practical advice. Is that true for crypto only or any kind of market? That's an excellent question, Mirt. So it's especially true of crypto. So what we're going to do today is talk about how certain features of crypto horribly intersect with certain features of human psychology. And it's just the way that we're wired. And I think that's what makes it such a vulnerable place for people and why it's so easy to lose money. So, Doc, I spent all my money on Healthy Gamer NFTs. Well, that's my condolences, my friend, because we've been to my knowledge, we haven't made any NFTs. But it wouldn't surprise me if someone else has, And thanks, Boat Chick, for the gifted subs. No, not yet. But we do get frequent requests for, people wanting us to start an HG coin and NFTs and things like that. So, maybe we'll do that at some point, I suppose. I don't know. We get Dr. K Crypto Baron. Yeah, I don't think so, man. What would the NFTs be? I don't know, man. Y'all tell me. Cult coin. Yeah, so we'll talk about that. I thought we were doing Surgeon General today. Yeah, we thought we were doing Surgeon General too, but that sort of the scheduling didn't work out. So, you do what you can. So thankfully, we posted on Twitter yesterday and we were just like, okay, who has questions for Dr. K? Let's just go through questions. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. Yeah, so let's get started. Okay. Alrighty. So I think we're going to probably see so here's the other thing about doing stuff like this. So we've had a lot of new people in the community recently. If y'all are new, welcome to the Healthy Gamer stream. Welcome to HG. So this is another reason I was excited to do Twitter posts is because I think people who have been with us for a while have sort of gotten a chance to learn a lot of what we share and things like that. And that's really awesome. And at the same time, we always strike this balance between going over old stuff for the newer people versus going into advanced topics for the old people. So old people meaning not like age-wise, but people who've been with us for a while. So hopefully today we'll get some like basic questions answered. For those of y'all that have been here for a while, some of this stuff may be like review. If it's review for you, then that's actually really good because that suggests that you're learning something and you're actually, growing in some way, which by the way, hopefully we'll start doing a study on recently in terms of can actually watching this stream or watching our YouTube videos or things like that actually lead to improvements in mental health, which hopefully we'll see if that's the case. We've gotten some data to suggest that, but we have to actually put together a proper study to make it free from bias, etc. But we'll see. Okay, so let's dive in. All right. Am new here, Zarisuki. Welcome. Okay, let's do it. Okay, so yesterday, at 12 o'clock, when we were concerned that our guest today may not be able to make it, we sent out a panic tweet. And thankfully, the internet responded. So thank you, internet. Otherwise, we would just be, I don't even know what we would be doing today. Maybe playing some Dota. Okay. So let's start from the top. This is like so good, right? So I lack any motivation going forward in life. What can I do? And this is going to be like a common theme that we see here. So let's just see if is there more? No? Wow, is this the only one? I could have sworn there was a ton of questions about motivation. Okay. What can I do? So, and I saw that there was a reply here where someone was talking about, don't rely on motivation, build habits instead. And that's a good thought. Habit development, I think, is a very, very good way to get productive. The problem with developing habits is that they require some amount of like effort to start, right? So this is like a really, really excellent point that you should rely on habits instead of motivation for productivity. But the problem with habits is that in order to form a habit, you have to do something for somewhere between 2 weeks and 6 months. And if you look at research on habit formation, that's actually how long it can take. So like the earliest habits tend to form in a few weeks. And some studies on habit formation show that it actually takes like 6 months. So the challenge here is that, sure, if we can get to the point of habit that outweighs motivation, but if you lack any motivation going forward in life, like what can you do? And so I think this is where a lot of times, when we sort of lack any motivation, there's this concept of going forward in my life, which I think you really have to deconstruct. So like when people say like, I lack any motivation to go forward in my life, but I want y'all to think for a second about the frontal lobes. So our frontal lobes are the part of our brain that plan and execute tasks. So if I say like, okay, like I have to talk about crypto today, then my frontal lobes are like, okay, so let's think a little bit about, okay, what's the sequence? When are we going to talk about crypto? What are we going to say about crypto? And there's certain certain operationalizing, so breaking a task into its constituent pieces. And then once we break that task into its constituent pieces, we can sort of move forward with it. The problem is that going forward in my life is not a task that your brain can accomplish. Right? So it's like, how do you measure going forward in life? How does your brain know that you have moved forward in life? And this is the important thing about the brain, is that the brain is a very, very efficient organ, and it's not going to waste energy. Okay? So if you think about like, what does your brain get motivated to do? It gets motivated to do things that it knows are possible. Okay? So this is really, really important to understand. So if we think a little bit about, if you're confident in yourself and you believe that you bring value to the world, it's easier to get motivated to like find a job or change your job or things like that. Because our brain sort of has this like, there's this part of our brain that essentially determines the chances of success before we engage in a behavior. So this is why, I don't know about y'all, but I haven't tried out for the Olympic swimming team, even though I think it would be kind of cool. I don't know if y'all have tried out for the Olympic swimming team, but probably the reason that you don't feel very motivated to try out for the Olympic swimming team is because your brain is like sort of like, don't bother, it's not worth your time. So one of the key things to understand about motivation is we can't be motivated towards things unless we have a sense that we can accomplish them. And so the first thing that you really need to do is like reframe this. So what does it mean to go forward in your life? Like, what does that even mean? How do you know So if you wake up today and your brain is like, you're like, okay, like I need to go move forward in my life. And then your frontal lobes are like, what am I supposed to do with that? Like, what does that mean? Like, how do I know if I've moved forward in my life? Is it doing 5 push-ups today? Is it cleaning out my closet? Is it taking out the trash? Is it applying for a job? Is it updating my dating profiles online? Like, what does going forward in life even mean? And so what tends to happen is that a lot of times we have a sense that we're stuck, right? We feel like we're behind. We feel like we're not moving anywhere. But that's an emotion, or it's like a global sort of like problem that we sort of feel. And so if I'm stuck, how do I get unstuck? Well, that's kind of weird because your brain doesn't know how to operationalize and break apart the feeling, right? If that sort of makes sense. So if I have the emotion that I'm stuck in life and I sort of feel globally stuck, and that could be based on, what I see on social media and like comparing myself to other people and all other kinds of like ahamkar or ego related things, then I sort of think naturally the antidote is to get unstuck. But unstuck is such a vague thing that like you can't really, your brain doesn't know how to execute on the task. It's sort of like, if you were to tell your brain, make sure you plan for the alien invasion. And it's sort of like, how do you even do that, right? Like, what does that entail? What are the outcomes? When is the invasion? Well, we don't know. How do you prepare for it? I don't know. And so like that's where your brain can't really capitalize it. So a lot of people who are stuck with a lack of motivation, one of the key things that you need to do is just first define what going forward in life is, right? So what does that actually mean? Like, what are the tasks that you need to accomplish to quote unquote move forward? Because a lot of the reason that we stay stuck in life is because we set ourselves up with a goal that's impossible to achieve. Like, literally think about this for a second. Going forward in my life, what is the verb? What is the action that I have to take to go forward in my life? Is it taking a step? Is it walking a mile? Is it moving in this direction or that direction? Is it increasing the amount of in my bank account? Is it stocking my fridge? Like, it's not a thing. You can't go forward in life. Like, that's impossible. So a lot of the reason that we lack motivation is because we set up goals for ourselves. We set up, directions for ourselves, which are impossible to attain. And then our brain has trouble figuring out how I'm supposed to do that, right? Because you're like, okay, like I don't, and then what we interpret that as is a lack of motivation. So our brain is motivated to, let's say, go to the bathroom when when our bladder is full. And why is it motivated to do that? It knows that it can accomplish it, right? It knows where you start. It knows where you end. It knows how to actually do it. So the first thing that we've got to do if you're lacking motivation is define what going forward in my life actually is. The second thing that you can do is understand why you need to go forward in life. And I know that's kind of a weird question, but where do you get the idea that you need to move forward? And I'm not saying that your life is necessarily perfect. And so you may say, well, duh, like clearly I need to move forward in life, but in what ways? Right? Like, what makes you think you even need to move forward? Well, I'm living at home with my parents. Okay, so what? Well, that's not good. Okay, so what's not good about it? Well, I don't know, like I'm not going to be able to find a romantic partner if I'm living at home. Okay, so it sounds like romantic partners are interesting to you. Let's think about that. So you have to figure out where it is that you feel stuck from. Because what you'll sort of discover is when you sort of notice why you're stuck, that's the process with which you break apart what going forward looks like. Okay, so like I'm interested in romantic partners. I'm interested in financial independence. I'm interested in everything. Getting in shape. Okay, then let's try to prioritize those things. Okay, what do you want to start with today? What can you accomplish today? Well, I can I can update my resume. Okay, fantastic. So by exploring why you feel stuck, you will naturally sort of start to figure out what are the dimensions of your life that you need to change. And then what you do is you tunnel down and you focus on just one. Because the third thing, which is really important, is there's a pitfall here, which is as you dig into why you feel stuck, your brain is going to logically give you lots of answers. So if I ask anyone, why do you feel stuck? Their brain will produce lots of answers. But that's an intellectual answer that is born from a feeling. And I don't know if this is getting a little bit too complicated, but oftentimes if I feel a particular way, my mind will be able to justify it however I want to. So if you talk to someone who feels like they're going to be doomed to be alone forever, they'll come up with 1,000 justifications. But interestingly enough, if you actually do like psychotherapy with these people or work with these people, what you'll discover is that the feeling of alone came first. So there's usually some kind of traumatic event where they they had a birthday party when they were 8 years old and they prepped everything for it, and then like no one showed up. And that's where the feeling of being alone was born from. And once that feeling is born, then your mind creates a cognitive bias. You start to justify it, right? You start to look at all of these reasons why you believe this thing. But the truth is that that justification comes after the fact. So a simple way to understand this is if you're politically oriented in one particular way, it's going to be very easy for you to see the mental gymnastics of people who are oriented the opposite way, right? We all go through these mental gymnastics, and how does that work? Why does our mind do that? That's because the feeling actually comes first. The emotion comes first. The emotion isn't born of logic, right? But anytime you ask yourself, why do I feel this way? The mind will generate 1,000 different answers. But those answers come from the emotion. They don't result in the emotion. So you have to be super careful when you ask yourself, why am I stuck? If your mind comes up with a laundry list of different things, some of those can be useful for operationalizing, but don't fall into the trap of just because I'm operationalizing doesn't mean that the feeling is actually justified or because of all of these things. Chances are, if you feel stuck, that feeling has an emotional root and some kind of like experience. So if you're lacking motivation, first thing to do is recognize that going forward in my life is not an action you can take. Like literally, you cannot go forward in your life. Like that's like physically impossible. It's not something you can do. So you have to better define what your goals are, because then your brain, your frontal lobes can be like, okay, like now I understand. Okay, put my books on the bookshelf. That's something that my brain can actually like understand and develop some degree of motivation towards. The second thing to do is dig into the roots of why you feel stuck or why you feel like you need to go forward in your life. And once you dig into the roots of that and sort of emotionally process that, understand that some, you'll recognize that that emotion is holding back your motivation. And if you can get to the bottom of that emotion, your motivation will naturally start to flourish. The third thing to keep in mind is there's a particular pitfall here, which is as you go down that path, be super careful for all of the justifications that your mind uses. Like, oh, I'm stuck because A, B, C, and D. Whereas chances are those things are not the cause of you being stuck. Those things are the result of you feeling stuck, plus the cognitive bias or cognitive filter that you apply from being stuck. So hopefully that makes sense. And if you go through that process, hopefully you can start to develop some kind of motivation. And then, as you start to develop some kind of motivation, lean into habit. Thoughts on the general impact? Okay? Questions? Literally picking a needle from a haystack where the problem found supposed to locate it? Yeah, so that's what it can feel like. That's exactly, so it's a great point. So Remix Gen is saying, it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack in terms of the source of my why I feel stuck. And that's exactly what it feels like, because your mind will generate 1,000 reasons for feeling a particular way. But even if you think about it, we don't feel a particular way because of 1,000 things, right? And just think about your life for a second. If you feel a particular way, chances are it's not like an amalgamation of 1,000 experiences. Chances are it's one experience or a couple of experiences that you repeat over and over and over again. And so that's exactly right. That's why what you've got to do is like kind of go to the source of the emotion, right? So there's an interesting tip there, which is ask yourself how long you've been feeling this way and when was the last time you didn't feel this way? And then what you want to look for is a change. So what changed? So like if I felt pretty good back when I was 16 or 17 and now I'm 22. What changed between like 17 and 18? Or what changed between 16 and 17 and 18 and 19? And so that's how you could sort of find where that process is. We go into this in a bunch of detail in Dr. K's guide if you look at the Vedic psychology portion, because this is like a skill that you can learn in terms of finding the root of your kind of like cognitive biases. Okay. So we've got Vita Boy who's saying, if my issue is when I create goals, I feel like they aren't genuine, like writing on paper what I want to accomplish, really hard to believe myself. 100%, right? So that's because your goals are being created from your intellect as opposed to like, they're like things that you should do, right? So this is a challenge. What if we look at like, what's the problem with like how we generate goals? So when I generate goals, like let's just think for a second about where do those goals come from? I sit down for a second, like I grab a piece of paper and I start listing all the things I should do. Well, just think about this for a second. How important is a should for generating motivation? How motivated are you to do the things that you should do? By nature of the fact that it's something you should do, you're not intrinsically motivated at all. So if you want to generate goals, what I'd recommend is instead of writing down all the stuff you should be doing, instead ask yourself, what do you care about? What do you actually value in this life? Not what you should do, what do you care to do? And this is where you've got to be kind of careful because you may fall into a pitfall of, well, what I care to do is play video games all day. I don't think so. I don't think you wake up today and you say to yourself, well, for the next 5 years, I'd love nothing more than to sit in my room and play video games for 16 hours a day. Like, I don't think that you actually care about that. I think that's what we do as a default. When we're looking at a list of all the stuff we should be doing, it feels overwhelming and we don't know what to do, so we might as well play a video game. That's how you end up playing video games for 16 hours a day for 5 years. It's not because you wake up and you're like, man, I really love this. Or if you do, you usually end up as a pro gamer, like, you know, an esports athlete. Like that happens, and usually that's where those people end up. So I'd start by really digging into like what you care about. And this is where like, so part of what we try to help what we teach our coaches is if you're trying to work with someone who struggles with motivation, what you need to do is move from the should to the care. Like, what do you care about? What do you value? Because that's what creates motivation. Thoughts on the general impact of high celibacy rates in young adults today? Are celibacy rates high? I'm kind of curious about this. So here's my first thought, is that you've got to be careful about your perception of what is like your perception versus reality, right? So I haven't seen the data, but I don't know that celibacy rates are high. So I think the impact that I see here is that somewhere along the way, some people started to believe that celibacy rates are high. I don't know that that's true. So then the question that you should really ask yourself is like, where does this question come from? So maybe they are higher, and I don't know about celibacy as well. Are we talking about like people who are, because celibacy is usually like something that's chosen, right? So you choose to be celibate. I mean, I know that there's population declines. I know that there's a decline in marriage, especially in some parts of the world and amongst some socioeconomic statuses. So those two are definitely true, but I don't know that people are necessarily having less sex or fewer people are having sex. I don't know. I mean, it may be true. And generally speaking, even if it is, so my first thought would be like, be careful about when you say, you know, the world is this today. Be super careful about where you're getting your information, because that's the nature of the internet, is like the internet propagates due to the fact that like all these content aggregating platforms, they figure out what you react to. They figure out what you're interested in. And then what they do is they serve you up that content over and over and over again. And so over time, what happens is you get like shifted from kind of like an open discourse to an echo chamber. And as you enter the echo chamber, you can start to believe things like this. Now, I'm not saying that this is a factually incorrect statement. I just don't have the data. And maybe you have the data. And if people are more celibate, as in they don't want to have sex, and that's a voluntary choice, I think that that's interesting. And I'm not quite sure about what the impact of that would be. I definitely have had, you know, I've talked to lots of people who don't want to have children because of what bringing children into a world that may end from climate change and stuff like that, which I think results in a population decline. I think that we are seeing population declines because people are less interested in having kids. So that I think is not so much about, I think part of the reason that we see less people or fewer people getting married and fewer people having children is because being a young adult is no longer as easy as it used to be. So like being a young adult used to be like relatively easy. And by relatively, I'm sure that what I'm saying is factually incorrect in some ways. So there's been a lot of advancement. But if you look at what I'm saying is it used to be easier to be independent as a young adult, to attain independence as a young adult. So if you just look at things like the rates of inflation, the increase in house prices, the increase in student loan debt, at least in places like the United States, if you look at all of these different metrics, you know, any amount of money that you earned 50 years ago would get you more than it does today. So attaining independence was easier. And as you attained independence, like you could think about having kids, right? Because now you can support someone who's dependent because you are independent. So I think what we're definitely seeing is that like we're seeing high rates or like lower birth rates. And that's because people aren't really like able to bring kids into the world from a financial perspective, which I think is a good thing. I mean, so I think that, you know, bringing a child into the world in an under-resourced kind of situation does not bode ideally for the child. So probably what we'll see is some amount of population decline, but like I don't think that that's going to be very drastic. I don't think the human race is going to die out. You know, I think yeah. So I'd be super careful about this as a premise. And I'd also be, you know, I think a lot of this, if you mean celibacy, is that people are, you know, certainly people are having fewer kids, and I think that's because of the financial hardships that young people face now. I don't know what this even means, so we're going to skip that one. This looks like some kind of weird Dark Souls video. What is this? I don't even know what this is. This looks like my run from Dark Souls or Elden Ring, where I'm just running. I have some poorly equipped amalgam of stuff, and I'm being ran at by lots of things. There's an elevator, which I can use to avoid things, or it could mean death. And, oh, look, Miyazaki left a zombie for me. Oh, no, let me run away from that zombie. Oh, look, there are zombies behind me. Run, 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 run. All the while taking damage. Just spamming that roll button. Roll, boy. Roll. And then we eventually get to a site of grace, I suppose. Or bonfire. I don't know. Okay. Moving on. Whirligig saw? Anyone? Okay. Why is it that I always feel like I'm not doing enough and I'm not getting enough? Like no matter what or how much I have, I don't feel satisfied and I want more. To the point I start hating myself for not trying harder or doing more. This is tricky. So sometimes we feel like we're not doing enough and we're not getting enough. And so we don't feel satisfied and we want more, right? This is a really common experience. So why does this happen? And what are the consequences of it, okay? So we're going to get to like where this comes from in a second, but let's start by understanding that this cognitive strategy leads to good material outcomes at the cost of suffering. So this is a min-max strategy to improve your outward life at the cost of your inner life, right? Like, y'all see that? So it's the person who feels like they're inadequate. So I see this a lot when I work with medical students, where no amount of work that they do is enough. And so they have to like grind and do more. They just never feel satisfied in themselves. There's always someone who's smarter. There's always someone who's studying more. There's always someone who's getting better grades. And there's always someone out there who's doing more. We also see this a lot in content creators. So if y'all have watched a lot of our interviews and stuff with content creators, you'll see that a lot of content creators never feel satisfied. And so oftentimes these are very successful content creators. And so if you look at this mindset, right, which is almost like the high conscientiousness, high neuroticism from a 5-factor model, which by the way is the temperament of people who are of medical students. What you sort of find is that like it's successful, right? So why does this happen? From an evolutionary standpoint, the reason it happens is because it's successful. We actually select for success through this kind of stuff. Because if you're never satisfied, it's going to cause you to work harder. And like to the point I start hating myself for not trying harder or doing more. And so if you have like self-loathing as your fuel, it's like a dirty fuel, right? It's not like this green, clean energy. It's like some, scuffed like coal, like dirty pollution generating. But oh man, it's like so sweet and it's so easy and it keeps you going, right? Like you can burn down entire forests, but like you can just destroy all that nature, but boy, it keeps you going. So it's like this dirty fuel that's easily accessible. And the cool thing is if you kind of like think about it for a second, this is a never-ending source of fuel. Because if you're never satisfied with your work, no matter how much you work, you're never going to be satisfied. So you're always going to work harder. And so it's like this never-ending source of like toxic fuel. The problem is when you burn it, it like pollutes the hell out of your life and your mind. But you're going to be successful. Right? You're going to be successful. And for a lot of people, that's what we care about. That's what we're conditioned to care about. That's all we want, is to be successful. Because then we'll have the respect and we'll have money and we'll have comfort and we'll have all these kinds of things. So the first thing to understand is that this mindset is not a problem. It's a solution. It's a certain way of fueling your productivity and ideally like results in success. Now, the problem with this is that in my experience, this does not actually lead to the best outcomes. This leads to good outcomes, but if you want to go from like 75% productivity to like 100% productivity, you can't have this attitude. So this attitude is contrary to the flow state. You can't attain the flow state if you're beating yourself up. Because the flow state is one where you're like kind of peaceful and like focused on your task and you're doing it for, it's just a different state of consciousness, which if you're beating yourself up, you're never going to attain. So the next question is, okay, where does this come from? So first, let's understand that this is adaptive. Second thing is that oftentimes this too has some kind of psychological root. So when did you start feeling like you were not good enough? Right? So that's like really, really important. Like when did this start? Where's the origin of this feeling that I'm not good enough? And sometimes like, I don't know what the ethnicity of this person is or, anything like that. But like we see this a lot, not just, I'm going to use a particular diaspora because that's common in the US, but, people from all over the world experience this where like you'll have a set of parents who are not really happy with what you do. They'll not really be happy in your accomplishments. All they really care about is that you outperform everyone else. So unless you're number one in the class, like that's not really that important. Like why can't you be like so-and-so's kid who plays the violin and has an A in math? And so you'll have parents who are very unsatisfied with you. The other really damaging thing about this, which I think is even more insidious, which I don't hear a lot of people talk about, is when you do achieve, what do you get from your parents? What you get is externally facing pride. And what do I mean by that? When you get an A+ and you're at the first chair in violin or whatever, right? And you're like president of the math club, what does your parent do? Do they say, good job, I'm so proud of you, you did so good, this weekend we can do whatever you want to, you're such a hardworking kid, you make me so proud? No, that's not what they do. What they do is they talk to their social circle about that. Right? They don't even like reward you. It's just like, now I have bragging rights. So when they go and they meet their friends at whatever, like at some party, right? Now it's like, now you're the easiest kid to brag about. And so even the reinforcement that you get, even when you accomplish things, like you don't get satisfied. You get that? Like you don't, like your parents aren't like, good job, I'm so proud of you. Right? It's like the positive, you're working so hard for this positivity and you don't even get it from them. You get like a little bit. And instead what they do is they turn their pride to the external world and they post about it and they tell their sister who they've always had a competitive relationship with, my boy soon number 999 is A+ in math club president violin thing. Right? That's where they actually put all their pride. They don't put it back into you. And so then you're left feeling unsatisfied. And then like this is like a core sort of thing where like you're conditioned to think that the way to be satisfied is to be number one. But even when you become number one, or as you get close to number one, or chances are you're not number one because it's really hard to be number one all the time, you sort of feel emotionally like unsatisfied. And then you carry that emotional dissatisfaction with you. And that emotional dissatisfaction with which you carry with you, because it's a wound from a prior like emotional experience. You can try to go fix it in the world today, but it's never going to get fixed because it's not, the wound is from before, right? The hunger is from before. And I don't know how to say this, but like, to be blunt, half the problems that we get into is because we're trying to fix things from our past in our present. Like we see this all the time in terms of relationships where it's like, you know, we'll say so-and-so has daddy issues or mommy issues. Like we even understand that like colloquially, like we get this. And what does that even mean? It means that my relationship with my parents, my dad or my mom, is somehow something I'm trying to fix in this relationship. And then it sabotages this relationship because this relationship has its own problems. Has nothing to do with mom and dad. And then why do we call it daddy issues or mommy issues? We don't say daddy issues or mommy issues in successful relationships. We say them in unsuccessful relationships. Why didn't the relationship work out? Oh, he had daddy issues. Or he had mommy issues. Or she had daddy issues. That's why the relationship didn't work out. And why didn't it work out? It's because they're carrying stuff from the past which they project onto their current relationship. And so as long as you're trying to fix the past in the present, it ain't going to work. And what you'll end up is like this, which is not feeling satisfied and always wanting more. There's going to be a fundamental sense of dissatisfaction because you can't fix the past in the present. Just not possible due to physics. Does that make sense? So understand where your dissatisfaction comes from. The dissatisfaction clearly does not correlate with your actual performance. Does that make sense? Because if dissatisfaction correlated with your performance, if your performance increased, then your dissatisfaction should decrease. The two are completely independent variables. So then the question is, what the hell does this dissatisfaction correlate with? The dissatisfaction correlates with a sense of a lack of self-worth, a lack of forgiveness, a lack of like accepting yourself for where you are, right? It comes from striving, being conditioned to strive and always wanting to do better. So it's challenging, but very common and very adaptive, right? Even if you think about if you're like an immigrant like I am, or like come from an immigrant family, this is the attitude that we grew up with. And why did we grow up with this attitude? There's a selection bias. So even if you look at evolution, there's something called the founder effect, which explains a lack of genetic diversity. So when you have a group of people when you have 1,000 people and 100 of them go to an island and they hang out there and they, you know, populate. And then when that population goes to 1,000, what you'll see is like an uneven amount of particular genetic alleles. And why is that? It's because you're kind of populating this with a certain set of traits. And so if come from an immigrant family, why is this common in immigrants? It's because the immigrants who were dissatisfied with their situation and beat themselves up were the ones who successfully left the country. They're the ones who became doctors and engineers and software developers and business people and things like that, right? And then they successfully moved. And then we see it. And now we have a whole culture that's like this. Because you have 10 successful people who are dissatisfied with themselves moving. And then since they're dissatisfied, they're always competing each other. And they all have kids. And then they pass that competition on to you. And then we end up like this. Make sense? Okay. How do you balance the learn to let go and the never let go / keep the person in your memories during grief? This is a great question. So when we talk about grief, we tell people to learn to let go. But we also like say you should keep the person with you, right? So it's kind of confusing because we don't really explain this stuff. We just have like, okay, learn to let go, but like keep the person. Do I keep the person in my memories? Do I keep thinking about them or do I let them go? Like, does letting them go mean that I don't think about them anymore? Like, how does this work? I think one of the most under-taught things in our society is how to grieve. My God. If we just taught everyone how to grieve, the world would be such a better place. So let's understand this. And like, we're going to dig into a little bit of science here, okay? Off the cuff. So if you look at trauma, there's really interesting research on trauma. And one of the key discoveries about trauma is that when you have when the human mind experiences a negative event, it tends to ruminate on that event. So we tend to think about it. So my mind goes to the past and I think about it over and over and over again. Then what happens is we enter a fork in the road. And the mind will either do one of two things. So for the mind that heals after the trauma, it'll do one thing. The mind that fails to heal from the trauma will do something else. So the mind that fails to heal from trauma will continue to ruminate in the past. All it'll do is like think about that thing in the past. The mind that heals takes something from that and integrates it into the self. So like what we see for trauma survivors is that survivors who take that negative thing and then like use that information to shape themselves and the worldview going forward are the ones who do well. Okay? So like a really good example of this is if you look at like cancer survivors, right? We even have a term for cancer survivor. We don't have like, this term for like rheumatoid arthritis survivors or, like E. coli survivors or cholera survivors or things like that. We don't have like an ethos or an identity around all kinds of diseases, right? I'm a car accident survivor. I'm an alcohol use survivor. Like, we don't say things like that, right? So if you look at something like trauma survivor or cancer survivor, what does that mean? That means that this is something that people have done for so long that it's kind of become like a thing that people do, where they take a particular negative experience and they incorporate it into themselves, like looking forward into the future. And when you do this successfully, this is what allows you to grieve healthily, right? So I lost my dad many years ago, but there are parts of him and parts of his wisdom and stuff like that that I've internalized and I've taken with me. And like, I still think about him from time to time, but a lot of that grief process goes into my wiring. And as it goes into my wiring and informs my future actions, I've like processed that grief and like, he's like, I take him with me, right? So I haven't let him go completely, but I don't actively think about him all the time. So we know this from trauma that essentially when you take an experience and you let it sort of like become a part of you and you change your sort of internal like view of yourself and your view of the world. And a good example of this is a cancer survivor, because that becomes a part of my identity, right? I'm a cancer survivor now. I survived cancer. I can manage this, right? I've lived through cancer. Like, I can handle this. So if you think about that sense of resilience that you get, it comes from taking that negative event and incorporating it into yourself. And then when you look to the future, it sort of stays with you. Whereas people, so when we talk about like, keeping a part of them with us, that's literally what we mean. What we mean is to take those memories and experiences and like, time with that person and let it shape who we are now so that we can move forward in the future. Now, when people get stuck in grief is they're not doing any internal work here. They're just thinking about the person in the past, right? You just think about the person over and over and over again. You're ruminating in the past. It's not affecting you at all. You're not changing who you are as a person. It's not informing the way that you look to the future. It's not giving you any sort of sense of like how you can live in the future. All you're doing is your mind is stuck in that rumination in the past. So it's not a balance between forgetting them and keeping them in mind. It's actually an integration of those experiences into who you are. And then you carry it with you. That's what people mean. Like this person lives on within us, right? Like that's kind of a weird thing to say, but like, what does that actually mean? There's actually science on this. People have done studies. And what they've realized is when you have ruminative thoughts and you direct them towards identity formation and identity change within the self, that's what happens. That's how someone lives on within you. Those are the steps. And when people get stuck thinking about the person instead of about themselves and how that person affected them, that's when they get stuck in grief and don't move on, right? I can't move on. I fell in love once at the age of 19 and she was perfect and it was amazing. And now 28 years later, all I can think about is that person. That's me being stuck in the past. I'm just ruminating on that person. It has nothing to do with me. So what we know from trauma survivors is that people who healthily incorporate trauma into their life are the ones that do better. And in terms of grief, it's the same thing. It's incorporating that person into your life. And there's another interesting perspective on this. I shouldn't say another, I'd say it's corollary, but from a completely different tradition. So if you look at Buddhism, so Buddhism and the Buddhist belief of karma is a little bit different from the Hindu belief of karma. So the Hindu belief of karma is that I've got a soul and I rack up all these karmic debts and people owe me karmic debts and my soul moves from one body to the next and I carry all my debts with me, right? So when a lot of people say, oh, like you can't carry it into the next life, the Hindus kind of disagree, okay? There are different perspectives. I'm kind of simplifying, so caveat there. The Buddhist perspective on karma is slightly different. So they do believe that things from the past, from past lives will affect you. There are things from the past that will affect you, but you don't carry your soul forward. You don't carry your debts. So the way that Buddhists kind of think about it is that you exist in this world. And this, once again, is a simplification. I'm sure that Buddhist scholars out there may disagree with this. So you're here, and just like you have matter and energy that cannot be destroyed, you also have karmas that cannot be destroyed. And that every action you take has consequences into the future. So I almost think about a human life as 1,000 different karmas spreading out into the world and affecting people right, left, center, all over the place. For a year, 10 years, 50 years, it's almost like what we think of as the butterfly effect, right? So every time you act, you are creating a cause that is an effect in someone else's life. And that sort of makes sense. Like if someone's, sitting down and they trip and they fall and they drop all their groceries and you stop for a second and you help them put their stuff together, you've created like an impact in their life. There's a cause and there's an effect. You've like sowed a karmic seed, which has some kind of effect. Versus if I feel bad about myself, I make a Smurf account and I poop on noobs all day in my game of choice, I'm also creating a karma, right? I'm affecting the lives of other people. And so one way to think about grief is that person is gone. That person will never be there ever again. But it's actually kind of like scientifically very easy to say that their effects linger on. Their matter still exists, their energy still exists, and even their actions like literally exist, right? If someone leaves you money in their will, that is their action which like literally exists. Every word they spoke to you exists within you. That's not like it's not like like they exist within, it's like literally, like, there are neurons that you have in your brain that have memories of what they said. There are going to be objects and words that they spoke and people that they helped and people that they hurt. And all of those things like a burst of karmas, like continue to move forward in life. And so if you think a little bit about the process of grief, it's kind of acknowledging that person is gone. But all these 1,000 actions that they've taken still live within me. Like their impact still live within me, the good and the bad. And so then the process of grieving is integrating that once again. It's acknowledging, okay, this person is gone, but they sowed all these karmic seeds which still bear fruit. And kind of acknowledging that. And that like these are karmas that are left. Maybe they left me money. Maybe they didn't leave me money and that leaves me resentful. They said certain things to inspire me. They said certain things to hurt my feelings. They said certain things to emotionally scar me, right? They were not a very good parent and they struggled with addictions themselves. And so I'm going to have to like let go that there's ever going to be like a parent in my life who was like, perfect and universally supportive or even decent. And as you work through that, as you sort of recognize that they're gone, but their karmic seeds remain in this world, you can sort of work through that, integrate whatever you want to, heal whatever you want to, and kind of like move forward. But that's also consistent with this sort of idea that integration of trauma and mourning into the self is how people heal. And we sort of have science behind that. Does that make sense? So in short, how do you balance forgetting and never letting go and never forgetting someone? By integrating them into yourselves. And when your mind is stuck in ruminating in the past, that's when you're stuck in grief. When you take what that person did in their life and make it a part of you and change you because of them, then you integrate it into yourself and then you can move forward and then you've like grieved in a healthy way. ZXP Ping, thank you so much for this. You're very welcome. A lot of first-time chatters today. So Krusty O's asking, so Dr. K, why would you want to create karmas? That's a great question. So the answer is you don't. So this also is a little bit more from the Hindu tradition, or leans more towards the Hindu tradition, but the Buddhists may also agree. And the traditions are not monolithic, right? So Hinduism, just like Christianity, and Buddhism, just like Christianity or Islam, has like all these different sects with like slightly different beliefs, okay? So I'm oversimplifying here. But the short answer is that the whole point of meditation, and this is, by the way, is like not really disputed, okay? This is just forgotten. But everyone who's talking about mindfulness and the benefits of meditation for anxiety, of which we're part of it, right? Because it does help with anxiety, but meditation was never designed to help mindfulness. That's not why people did it. That's not why Buddha taught it. So anyone who's like, oh yeah, like I like Buddhism and stuff, don't ever forget that the reason for meditation is enlightenment. And what enlightenment is, moksha, or liberation, is the freedom from the cycle of karma. So the goal of all that stuff is to no longer create karmas. Because the problem is that anytime you create a proton, you create, anytime you have a neutron and you split it into a proton, you have to create an electron. There's like no way around it. So the problem with karma is that it's a cycle which people get stuck in. And everything that they do to where they try to like fix something, they like create an additional karma. So there's even a story about Buddha, who knows if it's true or not, where after he became enlightened, some guy came and he's like, hey, I heard you're enlightened. And Buddha's like, whatevs. So the guy's like, I'd love to learn from you. And Buddha's like, okay, sure. So he teaches this guy for a long time, for years and years. After many years, the guy's still not enlightened. And he goes to Buddha and he's like, I've been studying with you for 5 years and I'm still not enlightened. And then he spits in Buddha's face. He's like, scam artist. And then, of course, like all of Buddha's disciples get enraged and they're like, how dare you, to the master? How dare you? And so they're like, they're about to, beat his ass, I suppose. And then Buddha restrains him and he's like, relax, chill. So the guy's like, I'm done with you. And Buddha's like, all right, adios. And then the disciples are like, why did you let that dude disrespect you, bro? Why you gotta let him disrespect you like that? And Buddha was like, that's a karma that he owed me. And so now, like, the reason I'm on this earth is like I've got a bunch of accounts to close out, and like that one was just closed out. So we're kind of done with that. So that's something that he owed me, whatever. So let him complete that karma. We're not going to react to it. We're just going to let him go on his way, and I'm done. I'm closing up shop, right? Closing all my accounts one by one. So you actually don't want to create new karmas, theoretically, in the pursuit of moksha. Now, personally, I don't believe that for myself and most humans. I think when y'all get to that point, you can sort of, close out your accounts. But generally speaking, I think that what we should do is create karmas. We should create positive karmas. That's like something that we should all work very hard to do. So whether that's planting a tree, whether that's helping out a friend, whether that's helping someone pick up groceries that have fallen on the floor, whether that's not smurfing and playing in the bracket that you deserve to play in, right? You do what you can in this world because you're only going to be here for a limited amount of time. So like, what is the state of the world when you leave it? So my matter will remain, my energy will remain, and my karmas will remain. So what kind of karmas do I want to give to the world? Like if I'm just annihilated, even after this life, and there's no segment of Alok or Dr. K that exists after this, then how do I want to spend this life? I want to try to create as much positivity as I can. Right? I can create negativity, but that's not what I want to do. So even many, many years ago, I had the choice to basically become a monk or not. And I chose to live in the world. And I chose, okay, like, we're going to dive into this cycle of karma. That's a choice that I make. And so either we're going to go the non-karmic route or we're going to go the karmic route. And I decided to go the karmic route. I think that's a good choice to make. But generally speaking, it's not really the end game. You can think about karma as like side quests, right? It's like you can get caught up in side quests until the end of time. And this is thankfully the world is a place that continually generates new side quests. And at some point we get kind of tired of doing side quests, and then you do the main quest, and then the game is over. Then you attain moksha, you attain liberation, and you're kind of done. Does that make sense? So some people are saying, is this all in Dr. K's guide? Not really. So Dr. K's guide has a lot of foundational stuff. So the thing about Dr. K's guide is that it's like comprehensive. So the problem with doing this kind of stuff on stream is that people may have 1,000 questions, which we can't necessarily go into because we've got other things. So the information is kind of scattered all over the place, whereas Dr. K's guide is like much more comprehensive. So if you listen to this, for example, and you're like, oh, that's really cool. I want to understand karma better. And I also want to understand like, what's the relationship between meditation and karma? How do I integrate those two things? Though that kind of comprehensiveness you'll find in Dr. K's guide, right? So we'll teach about karma and we'll teach about meditation and we'll teach about developing a practice. So it's like, it's more complete and it's like more linear. It's not just Dr. K randomly thinking about stuff. First time chatters, Junya Fujiwara is saying, Dr. K, should I have pizza for lunch? This is really important for me psychologically and spiritually. I'd say it depends. But generally speaking, unless you are absolutely going to enjoy it and have no regrets, then I would say you should not have pizza for lunch. So if you are having pizza to enjoy everything that life has to offer, then have the pizza. But if you are someone who regrets particular choices that you make in life, then don't have the pizza. Because if you don't have the pizza, you'll take the first step towards you'll build up the ability to choose things that you don't want. And the ability to choose and embrace things that you don't want is the most important step to become successful, is mastery of the self. Okay? I don't know what people are responding to. I'm catching up. Does the Bodhisattva create karma? I assume so, but I'm not like a Buddhist scholar. So. Where is the quest giver for the main quest? The quest giver for the main quest is go look in the mirror and then you'll find the quest giver for the main quest. That's actually half the problem is that so here's the thing. So you are the quest giver, and that's why it's so hard. Just think about that for a second. How easy is it to give yourself a quest in a game? Like you're not a quest giver. That's why so few people figure out this glitch, which is you give yourself the main quest. And everyone's out there doing side quests. People are trying to get rich. People are trying to get laid. People are trying to drive fancy cars. They're out there completing side quests, and what they really need to be doing is there's a secret quest giver behind a wall that you have to hit 99 times. And on the other side of that wall is a mirror. And then that person is the quest giver if you want to do the main quest. So someone's asking, how do I keep constantly motivated? So this is important to understand about motivation. You don't want to keep constantly motivated. You have to understand that motivation is going to fluctuate. I don't know that you can stay constantly motivated, but what you can do is create a life in which two things happen. One is that you capitalize on motivation in a way that is not lost when it happens. So you kind of strike while the iron is hot, okay? So that's where like you acknowledge that motivation isn't going to be there all the time. You're a human. Human beings fluctuate, right? They're not robots. They're not machines. So the question is, when you are motivated, how do you capitalize on it in a way that you don't lose it? So that's where, for example, like if I'm writing a book, that's somewhat easy because I can, keep it. And every time I feel inspired, I sit down to write. There are other things that are a little bit harder. Like I feel motivated to study today. I don't feel motivated to study tomorrow. So like if you don't feel motivated often enough, if you're studying, like that can be a real problem, which is why we come to number 2. So if we acknowledge for a moment that motivation is fluctuant, then the question becomes, what dictates how motivated you are? And this is where people lose out, I think, a lot on understanding motivation. Is that motivation is triggered by all kinds of different things. And the more that you shape your life to have pro-motivational external sources, the better off you'll be. So this is where like, I don't feel like studying today, but if I get together with 5 of my friends Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday in the library, for 3 hours and I have a standing appointment, even if I don't feel like studying, I will do some work. So this is where I think a lot of people who are struggling with motivation, you've got to do two things. One is capitalize when the motivation is there. And second is figure out like how to blow, increase the oxygen in the embers to rekindle that flame. So that's really what I would recommend. So just capitalize on it in a way that's kind of like sustainable, not sustainable, but preservable is a better term. So a lot of times we'll get motivated, but the amount of work that we'll do is not conducive to being picked up later. So we'll like do something half finished. Whereas like, if you can complete a segment and then have the next part ready for yourself, it can really help. So you can't stay constantly motivated. You don't need to. Just capitalize on it when it's there and then figure out how to stoke it is the word I was looking for, I think. Right? How to evoke it. And then set up those kinds of exposures for yourself. And then your motivation will go a lot long. You'll get a lot more done. Someone's Kanashi 018 is saying, I love pizza and it gives me happiness. Then eat pizza. Alfredo's Pizza Cafe or Pizza by Alfredo. Nice. Okay. Pengu saying, I got to hold a speech in a few days and I'm bloody scared. Please help. Okay. Let me give you all a quick tip about giving speech, okay? Quick tip about giving speech. So, everyone who wants to give a speech wants to do a good job. If you want to do a good job, it's the worst. It's going to lead to like suboptimal performance in your speech. So here's the way you give a speech, okay? Here's what you do. You recognize that these people want you here because they want to hear what you have to say. That's the only way you can give a speech, is if there's some kind of invitation. And you may say, but what about a class? Was I truly invited? Yes, you were invited. You can't show up in a random person's class and give a speech when it's like presentation day. Like, no one's going to let you do that. You can't do that. The only reason that you can give a speech is because someone's asking you to give a speech. And so then if you're giving a speech, you're giving a speech about something, right? So like even if you're giving a presentation on psychology of cryptocurrency, recognize that you know something that no one else in the room knows, or presumably, right? So because you're giving the speech, so you know something. And so just share. You're there to share. You're not there to do a good job. You're not there to convince people. You're not there to inspire people. Just share what you have to give. That's what giving a speech is about. It's about offering whatever you have to other people that have asked you to show up. And then they can't really blame you if it's not exactly what they wanted, right? Like you should try to authentically share whatever you can. And that's what you should have. It's a service, not an obligation, not a task, not a goal. It's a service. Someone's asking for your help. So you're going to show up and you're going to do the best damn possible job you can at sharing whatever you have to share. I think that's the best way to prepare for a speech. Okay? All right. Let's move on. So Amir H12 is saying, but my best is garbage. That's okay. So here's the thing to understand. That's okay. They're the dumbasses who asked for it. So you're going to give them whatever you have to give. Do y'all get that? This is very important to understand. It's the idea that what you have to share is garbage, which is the outcome orientation. It's the flip side of the coin of trying to do a good job. If it's garbage, then try to do whatever you can to dress it up, put some lipstick on it, put a nice ribbon on it, and then give them your garbage. Right? They're the ones asking for it. So don't like neglect it completely. And that's where if you're really sharing something, people are asking for your help. So I'm not saying shirk that responsibility. I'm not saying like don't do any preparation. You should absolutely prepare. But the reason you're preparing is not to do a good job. It's to try to help another human being. That'll cultivate the best motivation. It'll let go of these stupid thoughts like what I have is garbage, but then give whatever you can, even if it's garbage. Does that make sense? It's exactly to counter that kind of thinking. Okay. Let's move on. Man, we have so many things. I'm getting distracted talking to you. You guys want to talk about crypto? Okay, let's talk about crypto for a second. All right. So lots of people recently lost absurd amounts of money in the crypto/stock market crash. What are some good tips for people dealing with devastating financial/career losses? Also, tips for dealing with the financial stress in general would be lit right now. So I love this tweet because it's like, what are tips for dealing with devastating financial and career losses? As if tips is going to make a difference, right? Oh, like if I got tips, then everything would be better. Interestingly enough, since they have asked, I will do my best to give tips on how to deal with devastating financial losses, right? Because what you really needed there was the tip. Okay, let's talk about crypto for a second. Okay, so the first thing to understand is that crypto has a couple of attributes to it that are like relatively unique compared to other financial instruments. And then we also have like certain psychological aspects of humanity. And I think what's going on in the crypto world is that there's like a process of very rapid evolution that essentially takes advantage of the way that our brain is wired. And what we're seeing in crypto is that the most successful crypto ventures are the ones that like sort of take advantage the best of certain attributes of our psychology. And the interesting thing is that technology allows for a whole new level. I don't want to use the word exploitation, but because I don't know that people are like necessarily trying to be exploitive, but like technology exposes a whole new vulnerability in our psychology. And if you really want to understand, first of all, like why crypto is such a mess, and secondly, like what, if anything, you can do about it, we can look at how crypto is different, and we can look at human psychology, and we can see how they intersect. And when they intersect, the way that they intersect creates something that like neither one could do on their own, right? So we've been taking advantage of human psychology. People have been falling prey to their own vulnerabilities in human psychology for like thousands of years. And we've had financial instruments for a while too. When you put these two things together with a couple of key details, what you really discover is that there's like a whole new level, there's a whole new world of hurt that people can be in for. So first thing to understand about crypto is that it's volatile, right? Like it's not based on much. I don't know, maybe I'm an idiot and I don't understand, but to my understanding, it's not really like based, like if you look at like stock market, right? Stock market is at least has some kind of tether to reality in some way. Whereas like crypto is just like, it's not a thing, right? It doesn't have inherent utility, where maybe it does in some ways, but basically people buy crypto for the hope that crypto will increase in value, right? That maybe I'm wrong. Not an expert in crypto by any means. So what this sort of means is that since it's not pegged to anything, it's volatile, right? So like if Netflix, for example, recently lost some stock value because they lost subscribers, right? Facebook recently lost stock value because they lost users for the first time. They didn't grow, they lost people. So what we can do is like in the stock market, we have like some kind of thing, like a real thing. There's like a real thing, okay? So here's a thing. And based on the performance of this thing, there's a lot of human psychology and speculation that gets grounded on this thing. And so then we can amplify it a ton, right? So I recently saw that Tesla's market cap, for example, is greater than every other car manufacturer combined. So you take every other car manufacturer, you put together all of what their stock is worth. Tesla is worth more than that, even though Tesla makes a fraction of their cars. And why is that? It's because Tesla is not a car company. Tesla is like an energy company. It's a battery company. It's like all kinds of these other companies. So what people do is they take a real thing and then they'll like attach various features to it. And then when they attach features to it, you get a stock price. And the stock price is going to be fluctuant, but it's going to be somehow pegged to this, right? It's not pegged to nothing. The first thing about crypto is that it's volatile. And so since it can go up and since it can go down because it's not pegged to anything, what does that have to do with psychology? Why is that an issue? Well, here's an interesting question for you. How do human minds become aware of what is happening in crypto? Right? So like, let me ask you a couple basic questions. Like, how many units of cryptocurrency exist? how many units of cryptocurrency are bought or sold on a daily basis? What is the total market cap of all cryptocurrencies out there? Who owns what percentage of cryptocurrency? Like just basics. Like, even if it's not pegged to anything, what do we know about crypto? Nobody knows. Like, I don't know that anyone out there knows the answer to any of these questions. Even if you're like one of these, like, you know, crypto companies like Coinbase or Binance or whatever, like, I don't even know that they know. I don't know that anyone knows. So we have like no information. So then how do we have no like way of getting information. So how do we actually get information? We get information. Someone said news, as if. Who the hell trades crypto and watches the news? Like, seriously. Like, really? So we just get stuff that floats to the surface of our online feeds. That's how most people learn about crypto, right? They learn about it through like what people say online. So then what we have to recognize is what influences what we see online. So what we tend to see online is what's interesting. So what is the most emotionally engaging? So this is what, you know, content algorithm, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, everyone does this. Facebook. What people find more interesting, Reddit, is what gets upvoted, right? The more likes something has, the more it goes up. So what gets more upvoted? So what the internet does is it amplifies extremes. And it gives us the idea that the extreme is commonplace. So like 20 years ago when Facebook was starting and people coined the term FOMO, where did FOMO come from? FOMO came from logging onto Facebook and seeing a birthday party every single day where people are partying. But I only get one birthday every 365 days, but every time I log onto Facebook, I see people partying day after day after day after day after day. It's not the same person. Well, maybe. But generally speaking, it's different people. But what happens is all the best stuff floats to the surface. And it gives the human mind the perception that this is commonplace. And then we get the perception that everyone's partying all the time, everyone's getting laid all the time, everyone is celibate all the time, depending on which echo chamber you get into, right? And so it gives our mind the perception that the exceptional is the norm. Now, how does that correlate with the volatility? Well, because of the swings, like we get this really, really bizarre idea of just gigantic success happening all the time. Let me post my gains. Look at these gains. Like, you work out at the gym, you have no idea what kind of gains I got. And then we also post our losses. But here's the thing to understand. When you post a loss, how do other people respond to it? Do other people say, too bad for you? Oh, that must be bad. Do people like react to it the way that they react to war crimes being committed that we have video of? Or people being hauled away to concentration camps? No. It's like, strength, brother. Taking one for the team. You believe in the mission. Yeah. Even the losses create a positive sense. Like, look at the gonads on that person, man. Like, look at the size of those testes and the size of those ovaries. They went on a limb and they were a casualty of war, but all for the good fight. And so, like, you don't see the financial ruin, right? Like, you sort of do, but you don't see everything that happens after the post. You don't see their life. You don't see them not being able to pay mortgage. You don't see them moving back in with their parents. You don't see them getting unable to pay child support and support their kids. You don't see all of that. That's not what you see, right? Why don't you see that? Because if you posted that, no one would upvote it. What are people going to upvote? Lol, look at this noob. He lost his entire life savings. Upvote, baby. So there's this horrible intersection where when we have more options for volatility and we have an instrument that selects the highest volatility things, and you get bombarded with that over and over and over again, you get crypto. That's feature number one and like psychological element number one, okay? So the other thing that happens with crypto is that people have done studies that people who have problematic gambling, problems with gambling, are much more likely to engage in cryptocurrency trading. So there's always been a correlation between like problematic gambling and things like stock trading and stuff like that. But the correlation or causation seems even bigger in crypto, right? So like people who like have these tendencies to, go for it big tend to be into crypto. But there's kind of more to it than that. So the other thing about crypto is it's not based on anything, right? There's nothing there. It's not like this or, like a cough drop. There's not a thing there, a Sharpie. There's nothing there. So how do people make decisions about what to buy? Sure, they're getting all this bombarded by all this information, but like people who buy crypto don't say like, oh, I'm rolling the dice. Or they may say that and go lulz, but in their head, that's not why they stake their entire life savings on crypto. They don't do it based on RNG. They figured something out. I've got a method. This is what I really think is going to happen. I've been reading the forums. I've been browsing Wall Street Bets. This is what the apes are going to do. I figured out how to predict Elon Musk's tweets. And by the way, did you guys know what is one of the strongest predictors of crypto rise and fall? Like there's actually one thing that correlates. Or not, there may be more than one. One of the biggest things that correlates with increased price in a cryptocurrency is Twitter activity. Right? So it's not based on anything. Right? There's no you can't go like Warren Buffett style and like go back to basics or whatever Warren Buffett even does. I don't even know. My understanding is that he does some kind of value-based investing where he like goes and like, examines the mines that he invests in. I don't know. I'm sure someone knows more about that. But like it's not pegged to anything. But the mine, so this is like there's no real data. But the problem is that what we find if you look at studies on the psychology of crypto users is that they all feel like they figured out some kind of pattern or some kind of like logic to like what's going to go up or what's going to go down. So there's actually data that shows that there is a perception of control. There's a perception that like that information that you have is going to influence your ability to correctly pick what's going to go up and what's going to go down. I know it sounds kind of weird. That's how everyone trades, right? Is we have this idea that this stock is going to go up and this stock is going to go down. But there's this idea that like we can control what happens. Like not that the price will go up or down, but that we can collect information and we can make a calculated bet about the future. But the whole point is in crypto, it's not pegged to anything, right? So that's like even harder to do in crypto than it is in the regular stock market. And the regular stock market is like made of, smoke and mirrors anyway. And when you peg it to absolutely nothing, like it gets way worse. And this is where a couple of other biases come in. So when we don't actually have any real information to persuade us or dissuade us, this is fertile ground for a couple of different biases. The first cognitive bias that it's fertile ground for is the optimism bias. So everyone understands that bad things happen. They don't think that bad things are going to happen to me. That's just a bias of human nature. It's the whole reason why the lottery works. Like if you think about like, why does the lottery work? Like, it's a net loss. We all know it's a net loss, but like, I'm going to be the one that wins. Even if it's 1 in 212,000, I'm going to be that winner. So we all have this inherent optimism bias where we think we're more likely to like have better luck happen to us than other people. Human beings are not probabilistic thinkers, and we have this thing called the optimism bias, right? It's why like people who don't want to get vaccinated, they think they're going to be fine. Yeah, like the people who are dying in the ICU are not like, they're people who are unhealthy. It's not people young and healthy like me. So we have this optimism bias. We see it all over the place. And so when you have no actual information to dissuade the optimism bias goes through the roof. So it's like other people are getting owned. Lol, look at that guy. But when I put my life savings in, I'm not going to end up like him. And even if I did, it's going to be glorious. But I'm not going to end up like him. I'm going to get these 10 bazillion% gains. So the optimism bias is normally tempered by reality. But when it's not pegged to anything, there's nothing to temper the optimism bias. So everyone thinks that they're going to be a winner, which is further reinforced by like what our perceptions through social media, where the big gains are the ones that we see every day, right? That's issue number 2. The next thing, and this is kind of like relates to these two, is there's this thing called the availability heuristic. And the availability heuristic is the thing that our minds overrepresent emotionally engaging experiences. So, for example, if I go to Disney World and I get bullied by Mickey Mouse, the percentage chance that people who go to Disney World get bullied by Mickey Mouse is very small. I think. I have no idea. Okay. But if that happens to me once, the emotional charge of that experience is going to make me avoid Disney World for the rest of my life. So we tend to like make initial judgments about people and then like, that's it, right? Those judgments color all future things. That's something called the availability heuristic. So if you're a patient, if you're a doctor, for example, we have to really struggle with this in medicine. So if you're a doctor and you prescribe a medicine, and even if the chances of an allergic reaction are like 1 in 10,000, if you prescribe it to a patient and the patient, heaven forbid, has an allergic reaction, maybe even dies, even though it was safe the other 300 times you prescribed it and is safe 9,999 out of 10,000 times, that one experience is going to create such a powerful bias in your mind that you will never prescribe the medicine again unless you're aware of it. That's something called the availability heuristic. So emotional stuff, things that are emotionally charged carry more weight than things are like probabilistically likely. And the reason for this is very simple. It's because if you look at our limbic system and our amygdala, these are the emotional circuits of the brain, and you look at the hippocampus is where we learn. These two parts of the brain have very, very tight connections. And essentially, we've learned or evolved to learn from mistakes and negative emotional experiences. So one negative emotional experience can wipe away 10 positive emotional experiences, no problem whatsoever. So when you have this availability heuristic, what tends to happen is that as you see these emotionally charged experiences, it doesn't even have to be negative. It can be any kind of emotionally charged experience. Like, oh, I went to this place once and it was such an awesome time. Every time I go there, it'll be awesome. When you kind of factor that into like the stream of like high gains that you get from social media and stuff like that, it like activates that availability heuristic and like messes up your mind in terms of decision making. And so what we see here is like, once again, an intersection of technology and like the kinds of biases that you have and how these sort of like navigate to like get people excited about crypto, right? Because the other thing is that people will make money on crypto and they'll lose money on crypto. But if I spend $100 on 10 different altcoins or crap coins or butt coins or whatever, and I lose money on 9, but I make it big on 1 and I just break even, do you think I'm going to stop buying crypto after breaking even on 1 gain and 9 losses? Absolutely not. All that we need to do is figure out, okay, I learned from my mistakes. Now I know better. Let's go. Now I'm going to reinvest, but I know which 6 coins to invest in next time. So even if there's no win and no loss, it's not like your brain is like, there's no point in doing this. Absolutely not. Along comes the availability heuristic. Did you see how much that Shiga butt coin, light flavor coin, save the kids coin went up? Let's do it. Let's go. And then we get to, I think, the last and arguably most devastating, underappreciated aspect of cryptocurrency trading, which I have never heard anyone talk about. But it is absolutely a huge part of crypto gains and losses. So, when do you buy or sell cryptocurrency? What time of the day? You may say, well, what difference does that make? Well, cryptocurrency also has something unique that other kinds of stock trading, generally speaking, don't have, which is that they're bound by time and space, right? So there's like trading is open at certain hours and it's closed at other hours, but you can buy and sell cryptocurrency at all hours of the day. You can buy and sell whenever you want to. What difference does that make? Well, let's think a little bit about human psychology, fatigue, disinhibition, behavior, impulse control, and what happens to your frontal lobes and your decision-making capacity when you are tired. So even if there's no information to build it on, right? Because like, I don't know which coins, the coins aren't a real thing. It's not a thing. There's no object that it's tied to. Okay? If there's none of that, okay, then what do we make our decisions on? It's on whatever weird stuff we come up with in our head. We read this forum, we talked to this person, I'm on this crypto Discord, I watched this video on YouTube, and that's information? Like, what, you're gonna like outperform other people because you're listening to randos, talk to randos, and educate other randos about crypto? Like, and maybe you will, who knows? I can't say, because it's not like I can say that that strategy is wrong. But what I can say is that the ability to trade crypto at any hour of the day makes us more vulnerable to impulsive decisions and like a fatigued brain. So do you buy crypto at 2 a.m.? Like, what do you think about your decision-making process? We know objectively that decision-making processes get worse. We get disinhibited when we're tired. You can buy crypto while drunk. You can buy crypto while high. You can buy crypto no matter what physiological state you're in. Sleep deprived, up for 2 days. And so what impact does that have? I don't even know. But my guess is it ain't good. So as our brains get fatigued and we start trading at 11 p.m. at night, whatever little information we have, whatever little amount of reality we can base our trades on is further compromised by our own psychology. Because we're just like, our brain isn't capable of making the best decision. It's a hard decision to make at the get-go. And so this is the one physiologic thing which, like, I think is staggering. I honestly think if we restricted crypto trading to regular business hours, the losses we would see in crypto would go down. 100% believe that. Right? As Pudo TV is saying, I only buy butt coins at 2 a.m. Couldn't have said it better. Right? I buy crypto while I sleep. Do y'all get that? Like, this is like, it's physiologic. Like, it's not. Now, you could make an argument, just like, let's play devil's advocate for a second. You could make an argument that the more disinhibited you are, the closer you are to RNG, and maybe the closer you are to doing well. Because all this false information isn't going to lead to anything anyway. So who knows? Maybe it'll make no impact whatsoever, which in turn should even if it makes no impact, that should further prove the point that it's not based on anything, because having a functioning brain doesn't actually improve your odds of like winning in crypto. Okay? So like, here's the thing to understand about crypto. Who makes money in crypto? What do y'all think? Who makes money? Who is the most consistent? What is the class of people that most consistently makes money in crypto? It's two groups, okay? The people who are the developers and the scammers, right? So like, this is what's happened. It's like, you can almost watch it. If you understand evolutionary theory, you just look at crypto and everything is going to become very clear. So what did people discover? Who's actually making money in crypto? It's people who discovered, oh, there's a lot of people out there who are putting money into something that is fundamentally not understood. They can make purchases at 2 a.m. for Buttcoin, and they have no idea what they're doing. So I'm going to sell them something. I'm going to make a coin. We're going to do some kind of rug pull. It's going to be a pump and dump. It's going to be a pump and scump. It's going to be a Ponzi scheme. We're just going to use all the old instruments. And by making it into crypto, we are taking advantage of all of these psychological vulnerabilities. Like emotionally charged content rising to the top of social media. That makes people make bad decisions. It gives people a false sense of security. Oh, I made $1,000 on 0.1 Shiba Buttcoin. I made this much money on this coin. I made this much money on this coin. We're going to just take advantage of that. We're going to offer someone garbage and they'll buy it because they're buying. We just got to let them buy it at 2 a.m. We got to just create hype over it. So I'm going to make a meme coin. It's actually going to be a meme and then people are just going to buy it. And then some people are going to get successful. They're going to become billionaires and then they're going to talk to other people about it. They're not going to realize they have no idea what they're talking about. They're just one of the lucky, out of the billion people that bought crypto, like one of them is going to be a billionaire because of RNGesus. And when that happens, they're going to show up everywhere and then everyone else is going to think, oh, I need to do it like this guy. And it's going to give everyone a false sense of security. And the more money that person makes, the more emotionally charged it is, the more that we engage the availability heuristic, the more that we engage the optimism bias. Because I'm going to be like that guy. I'm not going to be like these losers. And by the way, who are the losers? Who do y'all know? By the way, can you name a single person who's lost a bunch of money in crypto? Do you know their names? Can you name people how many people can you name who have made money in crypto? And how many people can you name that have lost money in crypto? Just think about that. It's staggering. You can't even name them because you never hear about them because of the way that the internet works. And so all you see is wins, 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 wins. It's like you can't make propaganda this good. The only way that you can create something so delusional is entirely organically. No man-made propaganda can even stand up to what's happening in crypto right now. So, what do you do about it? Okay? Couple of basic things. And some of these things are going to make sense. Some of these things are going to piss you off so much. So if you want to trade in crypto, first thing that you've got to do is don't chase your losses. So we know from problematic gambling, we know that if you lose money, trying to recover from your losses is just going to worsen your cognitive bias. Like it's like trying to make up for it, right? So we even have a video on this on Dr. K's Guide to Depression. There's a video on falling behind and like this concept of I've fallen behind. So if you're chasing losses, like that's not good. So we know from like problematic gambling. So let's say I want to go bet on horses and I lose $1,000. The only way to make up for it is if I bet my last 100, right? I can't make rent at the end of the month. I've got $100 left in my bank account. Only option I've got to make it back is because I'm on the brink of financial ruin. I have two options: guaranteed financial ruin based on my investments right now, or possibility of financial recovery if I bet my last remaining dollar. Unfortunately, certain financial ruin is probably the better option. Seriously. Like we know that from problematic gambling and stuff. Now, the other problem with horses, remember, you can't bet on horses 24/7. So when you've decided that you can't buy any more crypto with your level head, and then 2 a.m. rolls around and you're watching memes about crypto, and then your brain is like, let's go. It forgets all of so the problem with crypto is that you only need to slip once, right? You're not constrained. Like, I know this sounds bizarre, but you're not constrained from losses by geography and time. People used to be constrained by geography and time to temper their losses. You can't bet on horses at like 4 a.m. The track is closed, but you can absolutely bet on crypto at 4 a.m. So we're not even protected by these global things like geography and time. Space and time no longer matter when it comes to cryptocurrency. We can't rely on them to protect us. So don't chase your losses. If you've lost your money, you've lost your money. Let it go. Second thing. I know this is crazy. Budget. Now, that may be a word that you guys are not familiar with, but budget. So if you want to trade crypto, set aside whatever amount of money you can afford to lose. And that's what you should trade on. If you want to go for it, go. Spin the wheel, baby. Go for it. But budget. And then people are like, oh, I know. I'm going to make a budget coin. The more coins that you get, the more you'll be able to budget your cryptocurrency. It's going to be budget coin. It's going to be great. Allows you to budget, right? And so we see all this kind of crap where people are trying to tenuously tie something to something. We may even do that. Who knows? Someone may figure it out at some point. Like, I think there's interesting stuff going on in blockchain. Don't get me wrong. But budget and set whatever your limit is. And like when you go to Vegas, like set your limit. What amount of money am I like capable of losing? And then like that money is gone in your mind. So the last time I went to Vegas, I decided I was willing to lose $100. So I started playing craps, okay? Within an hour, I was up by like $160. And then I was like, I'm done. Rest of the night, I didn't play anything. I was up $160. And so like I walked out with $260 because I was up and it was an hour. And I was like, there's no way that I'm going to make more money than that. So I just stepped out, right? I was like, Finished. So figure out what amount of money you're willing to lose and budget it, and then by all means, like, lose it. But then you'll save yourself from financial ruin. 2 other tips that y'all aren't going to like. Number 1, limit the hours in which you purchase and sell crypto. I know it's crazy. I know you can do it 24/7. You can be on Reddit 24/7. You can be on YouTube 24/7. You can be on Twitch 24/7. You can play games 24/7. You can do all kinds of stuff 24/7. Just because you can do it 24/7 doesn't mean that you should do it 24/7. Right? Just like anyone tells you, if you want to climb MMR, should you play games? Should you play North American pubs at 4 a.m.? No, that is not the way to climb MMR. Like, we know this, right? So we have physiology. The science of physiology has told us that it's bad. You make bad decisions early hours in the morning. And then this truth, which we can be skeptical of, because who the hell, what is physiology anyway? How do you put physiology on the blockchain? Like, it's not a real thing, man. If it can't go on the blockchain, it ain't a real thing. Budget Coin 2022 to the moon and to Mars. There was an eclipse yesterday, by the way. Did you know that? That means that Budget Coin is going to go up another 50%. I've seen it in my dreams. Okay? So, you have to limit your decision making. Restrict the hours that you can trade in. And even if you doubt that that is actually a thing, go try to climb MMR at 3 in the morning for your local time zone and see what happens. We know this. It's not going to go well. So figure out when you're going to trade and only trade within those hours. Next thing, unsubscribe from half of your crypto content. Then you say, Dr. K, what does that mean? What is half? So first of all, round down. So round in the favor of less. And reduce your crypto content consumption by 50%. But what if I miss something? There's no real information out there, folks. Like, what information is out there that you're going to get? Cut it by 50%. That's my honest recommendation. Could I be wrong? Sure. Are there billionaires who believe that they are billionaires because they made the right kind of bet and they figured out what was going to happen and they can see the future? Sure, I could be wrong. Generally speaking, I think if we look at the psychology of it and we look at exposure in the mind to these things like FOMO and big gains and stuff like that, if we open our mind constantly up to the optimism bias and stuff like that, because here's the thing that we know, there's also there have been scientific papers written on this, where the amount of exposure that you get to crypto correlates with the amount of crypto that you buy, and in turn correlates with the amount of money that you lose. So we know that sensory bombardment, if you think about propaganda campaigns or you think about political campaigns where they hammer your mind, advertising campaigns, marketing campaigns, where they hammer you, right? You see billboards, you see this, you see it everywhere, and you start thinking about it and then you're going to want to buy it. So limit your crypto news, if you can call it that, memes, whatever, by 50%. So if you follow crypto stuff on Twitter and Reddit, can one. If you use only one thing, only Twitter, I would unfollow half of the people that you follow. And then notice what happens in your mind if I tell you to do that. What? You're depriving yourself of half of the worthless knowledge that you're getting exposed to at the benefit of your mental health. Okay? The last thing is that if you want to succeed in crypto, I'm not kidding about what I'm about to say. So honestly, if I was going to buy crypto, you know what I would do? I would straight up learn astrology. So we had this funny thing where I pulled out my dowsing pendant and I dowsed 3 stocks for Stock Guy. And my understanding is that they did pretty well. And he was like, we should do this again. We should absolutely do it again. If you want to buy crypto, I don't think there's any good information out there. And I'm ignorant. I'm not an expert in crypto. Maybe y'all know better than I do. But I would say that chances are astrology will work just as well as whatever kind of other scheme you figure out. Unless you want to be one of the scammers, in which case I think that'll probably be pretty successful because people are buying crypto. But I think really the best way to make money in crypto is straight up divination. Specialize in diviner, pick up a couple of those levels, learn tarot, learn astrology, learn that crap and buy crypto based on that. Because it's not even clear to, if you do that, because that presumably doesn't give you anything, it's just going to be pure RNG. And pure RNG may actually outweigh people making false informed decisions. Because at least with RNG, you're not falling victim to the cognitive biases. You're letting the cards decide. There's actually something that, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but, you know, hopefully I can talk about this. So I've worked with a lot of people in finance. So, you know, there are some financial institutions that have made a ton of money. And the way that they made the ton of money is they looked at all of these like things like Robinhood and stuff, and any bet that gets made on Robinhood, they take the opposite side of the bet. There are some institutions that made a huge amount of money. Whatever anyone purchases, we're going to take the opposite side of the bet. If you want to buy something, I'll sell it to you. I don't care what the value is. And think about that. How would that actually make money? It's because some financial institutions discovered that easy access to trading is going to lead to a flood of idiots spending money and not understanding things. And the Dunning-Kruger effect for these noobs was so bad that any decision they make on average is likely to lose money. So all I have to do, if I can get 100 idiots to make bets, all I have to do to make money is I have to take each and every one of those bets. And if there are enough idiots, I will make a ton of money. And that has actually happened. It's wild. So if you actually want to outperform it, I'm not kidding. I think that in all possibility, and remember, this is like, I'm ignorant of this, okay? So I'm talking about this as a psychologist, I'm not even a psychologist, I'm a psychiatrist, but I'm talking about this from a purely psychological perspective. I do not see, so there may be a crypto expert out there, y'all may be a crypto expert out there, that Dr. Guy has no idea what he's talking about. Sure. If you want to prove me wrong, like, I'd love to hear, like, you know, I'd love to be educated because it's not my area of expertise. But what I can absolutely feel confident in, the reason that I'm saying it is because if you look at like basic principles of psychology, you can see how this kind of situation can come to pass. Like, there's just too much ignorance, too much money, too much bad decision making. And so the one thing you can bet on is the predators. It's like a bunch of like these noob fish have like entered a pond. And then we've just got like a half dozen gators. And what do you see is increasing the propensity of scammers. Why is that? It's just like evolution. When you have 1,000 fish and you have 3 alligators, in like 6 months, you're going to have a dozen alligators. And you're going to have more and more alligators, more scammers, more scammers, more scammers, until you hit a dynamic equilibrium, where the chances of getting scammed become so high that people stop doing crypto. And as they stop doing crypto, the scammers will start to die off. They'll start to starve, right? And the alligator population will go down. It mirrors evolutionary theory perfectly. So we're on the upswing of scammers and predators, and we're on the downswing in terms of like people like losing money, right? Like, or upswing of people losing money as well. More people are losing money. And as long as these like basic psychology principles are at play, and as long as you can trade crypto 24/7, by the way, this is just the beginning of it. So there's like, through various research that I have done, right? There's so much more to it. There's 8 or 9 different attributes of cryptocurrencies, which I think intersect with about 10 to 12 cognitive biases. I've just sort of shared some of it, but like, and we could keep going. There's just more and more features of it that are like, and so it's tough. Yeah, so Michael Reeves made a video in which his goldfish decided on investments and it outperformed Wall Street bets. I'm not surprised at all. So this is what I'm saying. Like, big institutional investors have made tons of money on basically that. They're like, oh, if you look on average, the average person who uses a particular app, let's say, loses money compared to the market. So all we have to do is just take the opposite side of the bet. And RNG, your chances of losing money in the market may be greater than 50%. So if all you do is just RNG, like, you may actually outperform. Questions? Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Like, maybe we'll do an experiment one day where we use tarot cards or Vedic astrology to buy crypto. I mean, so here's the thing. The other thing I'll say is I'll admit ignorance. So there may be people out there who are like, clearly Dr. K has no idea what he's talking about. There's absolutely a policy and a procedure, and there are ways, there are like analytics, there's like theoretical analysis that you can do and stuff like that. I mean, we do know that there are some bits of data that correlate with crypto price, like social media activity is one of them, right? So we know that there's some correlation there, but like, I think for the majority of people who are trying to play this game, the internet creates a situation where, in short, they give you a false sense of confidence. It kind of exploits. I don't think it's like intentional necessary, but like I don't blame Twitter for trying to exploit people in terms of crypto. I think it's sort of an organic process where we have all these like new pieces that are fitting together in ways that they never have before. Thanks for the gifted subs. Yes, dude. Did you make those money? Did you make that money off of crypto? The 10 gifted subs? Dodged. Yeah, so if you dodged the gifted sub, I think this is your day to have good karma elsewhere. You haven't spent your good karma. So maybe you should buy some weird altcoin. Right? Okay. Yeah. So I do think like blockchain and stuff is cool. Like I just, and I mean, I really this is a situation where I really don't know what I'm talking about. Like this is just what I see, but I don't actually know anything about crypto trading. So what I see though is that understanding psychology, like it makes sense what's happening. I don't know, but that's where you can, it's sort of like, so if I do like consulting for, a company, for example, I'll go there and like, I don't know anything about the business, but I can see the psychology of it. I can see the group dynamics. I can see the politics. I can see the passive aggressiveness. I can see the cognitive distortions. I can see the ego. And so that stuff I see in crypto as well, because like, here's the thing, like crypto involves humans. So I understand the human aspect. I don't know anything about theoretical analysis and stuff like that. So maybe someone has figured it out. But even if someone has figured it out, which I'm not saying isn't possible, because once again, we do have data that it mirrors some things like social media presence, like tweets. The number of tweets correlates with like the price of a cryptocurrency. The number of people who understand that stuff has to be few and far between. And I think what seems to be a lot safer is just scamming people who want to buy crypto. Not recommending it, that, by the way. It's just like that seems to be the more guaranteed way to make income, which is predatory in nature and is unethical and immoral and is probably illegal too. Yeah, so first time chatter invasion is saying you can apply the same psychology to traditional markets. The only difference is the platform is more open, so more people can participate instead of only bankers, so there are a lot more cases to observe. 100% agree. So that's what I think is interesting is as the platform has changed, it opens us up to a greater amount of vulnerability psychologically. And trading 24/7 is like the simplest example of that. Because we make bad decisions like at certain times of the day, and we make better decisions at other times of the day. And that, once again, presumes that a better decision outperforms a bad decision in crypto, which is something that I've actually challenged today. But yeah, I think the platforms are a big part of it, right? The platforms, the social media, it's like done differently. And those changes have actually made people more vulnerable. Yeah, it's like rival Orc War Boss is saying, going to a casino late at night when I'm mentally exhausted and probably won't even leave when I'm winning. Absolutely. Yeah, and then we've got people like MechWarrior2 saying crypto only exists because humans haven't discovered everything about prime numbers. I have no idea what that even means, but demonstrates either my ignorance or that person's ignorance. I don't know. Okay, y'all want to meditate? What do y'all want to do? Meditate or more Twitter posts? Can we get a poll? Azrael is saying, I invested in another currency called money, and I just have to complete daily quests at more Twitter. Okay. Yeah, we'll do a Vedic astrology stream at some point, maybe. Can we want to buy poll? PST. I will do let's do the poll. Oh, the other thing that, yeah, there's a lot more to say. But just as another example. So the other thing that y'all have to remember is that when it comes to cryptocurrency, even if you assume that there's no information out there and there's, if there's no information out there and there's like no good way to make decisions, you still have to remember that there are players in the game who aren't bound by your rules, right? There's still the exchanges, there's still the developers, and there's like a lot of stuff out there where there's like real power in terms of crypto, which you as a core user don't have. So you're playing like, it's like when you go to the casino and there's the house, right? And you can't win against the house. That's even worse in crypto because at least with the house, like there's some sense of like odds. So when you go and you play blackjack, people have sat down and like figured out and calculated like what your odds are of winning or losing. And if you play good blackjack, I think you can get like 48% chance of being positive or something like that. You can actually play blackjack and get pretty close to 50%. The problem is in crypto, like we have no idea what the actual odds are. And there are people in the house that are altering the rules and, you know, like the off ramps, for example, are like very expensive. There we go. Right, I don't even understand that stuff. So I think like the general idea of crypto, I think is interesting and pretty cool, right? So this idea of a decentralized currency, because that's the other thing is that, you know, the problem with currency is that there is an institution that gets to do whatever they want to it, right? So like that's the basic problem with currency. And so the idea of decentralized currency, I think, is really interesting. Okay, close to 50-50, but it looks like Twitter wins out. So we'll do like 1 or 2 more Twitter posts. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Okay. Analysis of the difference in mental health levels between Western and more traditional cultures. Role of religions / the lack of greater life purpose. It's a great question. So, what's the relationship between mental health problems in the West and in more, I don't know what traditional culture means, but let's assume East. And what is the influence of religion and the lack of like, what's the role of religion in this stuff? So this is a really interesting question. What's the relationship between mental health and culture and mental health and religion? So there's a lot of evidence that shows that exporting Western culture leads to an increase in body dysmorphic disorder in cultures that receive exported Western culture. So it looks like eating disorders especially seem to flow with like the exportation of Western culture. And at this point, eating disorders may have taken root in other places like Japan or South Korea or places like that. So then they've started to like propagate as well on their own there. There's some data of that, okay? There's also some data that shows that generally speaking, depression is more common in North America and Europe, but there are caveats to that, which is that the interpretation of mental illness seems to be different in different cultures. So if you take a standardized instrument for depression, like let's say the Beck Depression Inventory or the PHQ-9, and I travel to like Sudan, what I may discover is that the rate of depression in Sudan is far lower than the rate in the United States. But that's because the instrument that we use to detect depression was developed in a particular cultural context and doesn't really capture sort of the cultural like manifestation of depression in different cultures. So the phenotype of depression, what depression looks like, will be different depending on what culture you're in. So for example, like in Indian culture, feelings of depression are generally speaking like will manifest as like odd physical complaints. So people will complain about upset stomach, they'll complain about cognitive fogginess, because in the East, the sort of the concept of a mental illness doesn't exist in the same way that it does in Western conception. So conceptions of psychology are different. So there does seem to be a cultural sort of like specificity there. But this is where if you do more advanced research, what you tend to find is that if we sort of say that depression looks different in different cultures, but then if you tunnel down further, okay, if it looks this way over here and it looks this way over here, is the percentage of people who suffer from these two things basically comparable? And the answer is like, generally speaking, yes. So it looks like in the most nuanced and advanced research on things like mental illness, that they tend to be pretty consistent worldwide. Now that's got a bunch of caveats that we've already gone over. Like, so one is, for example, the exportation of culture and the correlation with mental illness. So that could be a factor there. That also begs the question, if I have vague physical symptoms versus mental symptoms, and we're saying that both of those are about, let's say, 10% of the population, are those different illnesses or are they the same illness? Is that depression manifesting this way in culture, manifesting physically in one culture and manifesting mentally in another culture? Or is it like two different illnesses? It's a good question. We have no blood test or no genetic test or no final test for depression, so we don't really know. We also know that, for example, the instruments are culturally sensitive. So if you move it to a different culture, if I take the Beck Depression Inventory and then I go administer it to people in like Russia, who knows how well it'll translate? Their experience of depression may be different. So the short answer is we're not really sure, but chances are, my sort of conclusion, which is highly disputable, by the way, is that generally speaking, if we look at the neurochemical processes that lead to mental illness, they tend to be pretty conserved across humanity. So we know that schizophrenia exists everywhere. But there's also other kinds of very interesting data, like the likelihood of developing schizophrenia is greater if you're an immigrant. So schizophrenia is greater in immigrant populations than it is in local native populations, which is just weird findings. There's a lot of like stuff that we don't quite understand, but generally speaking, my take is that mental illness is pretty common throughout the whole world. It just looks differently in other places, but it has a root core problem. I mean, the core problem is the same, but it manifests in different ways. So next thing is, what about religion? So this is where I think for a long time, religion was used to address mental health, right? So I'm not necessarily talking about mental illness, but if we look at the ways in which people made sense of the world. So if you look at research on psychotherapy, for example, there are different types of psychotherapy. But what we've discovered is that psychotherapy type A may not be better than psychotherapy type B or C. What leads to good treatment outcomes is not which kind of psychotherapy that you do, but the adeptness of your therapist in a particular type of psychotherapy. So if therapist 1 understands this kind of psychotherapy really, really well, and therapist 2 understands this kind of psychotherapy really, really well, and therapist 3 understands this kind of psychotherapy just a little bit, A and B will be about equal and will outperform C. So it's comfort within a particular system that seems to correlate to the best treatment response. And I think we sort of see that in religion as well. So before we had psychotherapy, religion sort of handled this kind of stuff, right? So if you lost a loved one, who consoled you? Who helped you get past it? Who helped you with mourning? It was oftentimes a religious figure. So there isn't a therapist, so you don't go to a therapist, you'll go talk to a priest or someone who will help you make sense of things. Just like we talked about earlier, will help you like integrate and understand the loss, will help you cope, oh, they're in heaven, or they'll be reborn, or whatever, whatever kinds of soothing things they'll say. And as long as there's an internally consistent system that the person who's consoling you is confident in and competent in, that leads to positive outcomes. Now, the other thing is that religion was also a very good, by good, I mean like it was comprehensive and seemed to meet people's needs in terms of finding purpose and direction. So religion would tell people what to believe and tell people, generally speaking, what to do. Actually, I don't even know if I agree with that. That's more Judeo-Christian religions that tend to be more commanding in nature, right? So they'll say like, here's the 10 commandments. Do these things and don't do these things. Whereas the karmic religions are even different in that way. The karmic religions say there's karma. You can do whatever you want to, but there's cause and effect, so your causes will have particular effects. And the value judgment actually comes from us. It doesn't come from the religion, which is sort of a foreign concept. But there isn't like an intrinsic morality, which is also debatable. So there's a lot of nuance and caveats here. So I do think that what's happened is that as we've seen the decline of religion, we've had to grapple with these questions more. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the decline of religion is bad for humanity. It just means that if we're not trusting religion to give us the answers, we've got to figure that stuff out on our own. But the jury's still out whether listening to religion or figuring it out on our own is better over time, right? So religion, I think, made things simpler for us and sort of simply dealt with things like mental health and mental illness. But as we've like learned about psychotherapy and stuff, it seems like we can sort of target particular problems and develop interventions more specifically for them, as opposed to religion, which is like an amalgamation of all kinds of stuff, right? There's morality baked in. There's some amount of like psychotherapeutic kind of interactions kind of baked in, going to church. Churches have like support groups and social capital and like talking to the priest and like, you know, developing acceptance. So for example, we know that just developing acceptance is good for your mental health. Like it leads to less suffering over time, right? That's what acceptance and commitment therapy is based on. And religion offers easy avenues to accept and surrender to God and things like that. But it turns out that if you look at the science, it's not the God that seems to be important. It's the fact that you accept a God or surrender to a God that leads to the therapeutic value. Now, people who are very religious will dispute that, and they will say, no. Surrendering to a false God is bad for you. The God that you should surrender to is my God, because my God is the real God. So I'm not going to comment on that. If you believe that, that's totally fine. What I'm talking about is science. So we know that the concept of acceptance, which is something that religion is taught, acceptance and surrender and stuff like that, it's the will of God, right? That's sort of where acceptance kind of comes in. We can take that concept, we can remove it from religion, and we can apply it, and it seems to have therapeutic benefit. The last thing that I'll sort of say is that there are some religions that really do consider mental health and mental illness very, very centrally. So this is where my personal bias may come in. But I think if you look at the karmic religions, this is where I think religion really isn't even the right term, but it's sort of like a Western construct. But if you look at things like Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, it talks about how the mind works, right? So like, I'll give you guys an example. So let's grab just the top book on my shelf. So this is the Gheranda Samhita, okay? So this is commentary on the yoga teachings of Maharishi Gheranda. So this is presumably a religious leader, right? But if you look at like what he actually says, I'm just going to like flip it open to a random page. So let's go to page 371. Okay. The process of controlling the mind through the medium of the senses is called pratyahara. In this chapter, the knowledge of pratyahara is imparted in brief by sage Gheranda to his disciple, King Chandakapali. He begins with the description of patience by combining it with the senses. His analysis is based on the understanding that patience is impeded by negative or positive feelings in the mind, which arise due to the various experiences of the senses. In his opinion, if the mind is separated from those sensory feelings and experiences, their effects will automatically stop. In this way, an internalized state of mind will be achieved. So that doesn't sound like a religious text, right? But if you look at a Western conception, this person would be viewed as a religious figure in the East. But I think that the yogic perspective and like this karmic tradition is like very, very into how the mind actually works, the nature of suffering, the nature of happiness, the nature of thoughts and where they come from. And so religion sort of taught that, right? It was sort of viewed in the province of religion. But even if you look at like sort of the evidence-based effects of mindfulness, that is a religious practice, quote unquote, right? It's not really a religious practice because anyone can do it. It has nothing to do with belief. But if you look at like the origins of meditation, they were in the West what we would categorize as a part of a religious tradition. So Buddhism is like, we classify it as a religion, and Buddha was teaching people how to meditate and how to understand their minds. So I do think that this is what we're also seeing, is that as we're understanding kind of like the value of some of these quote unquote religious traditions, we're removing the religious piece from them and we're teaching them separately. There's a certain loss there because I think that when we do that, we tend to discard anything that we don't like, as opposed to, yeah, so like we'll discard things for like based on our own biases and political beliefs. Whereas I think we're losing a lot of therapeutic value there because we're like, yeah, that sounds kind of shady, right? So we'll believe sentences 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, but we'll just sort of say like, okay, 11 is ridiculous. So we're not going to do that. And then what's happening over time is the science on meditation is advancing, right? So remember, like 50 years ago, if you said that meditation could be used as a treatment for mental illness, people would have called you a religious quack, right? They're like, oh, this guy's like, he's like a religious nut. That's crazy. There's no way that meditation could help with mental illness, right? So that's what people used to say. And now we'll say certain things about meditation, like, yeah, I can help with mental illness, but there'll be other things that will say, oh, that's absolutely ridiculous. So we've just moved the line, and we're moving it slowly as we sort of scientifically test things and stuff like that. So I do think that religion has traditionally had a role in mental health and having people make sense of the world, although a lot of people will connect the dots and will jump to, thus it is a tragedy that people are more agnostic or more atheistic today. I wouldn't quite jump there. Like, it's had a role, and now our as religion sort of declines, or people generally speaking become less religious, I don't think that that's necessarily a loss. It just means that we have to figure out the answers for ourselves. I identify as a duck, and I'm offended by calling people quacks. I caught the flu right before exam week, and it's really hard, extremely hard to focus on studying and projects. Do you have any tips for me? Yeah, I'd let your professors know. I'd get a doctor's note, and I would let your professors know. I would say, hey, instead of studying this week, so this is a very common misconception, that the only time you can get a pass for an exam is if you are sick on the day of the exam. Whereas, like, if I was your professor and someone emailed me and was like, I had the flu last week and I literally could not study. If they did it in advance, that is, make it more believable. So if it's like Friday and the exam is on Wednesday and someone emailed me like, I've had the flu last week, I really have tried to study and I haven't been able to. Can I get an extension? I would just ask for help. That's my tip. Let your professor know what's going on. Yeah, Nikos Akainu is saying people are becoming less religious and more spiritual. I think that's what we're seeing, right? Okay. So we've got time for maybe one more. Okay. Girlfriend not clingy anymore. Hard to process. What do? That's such a great question, dude. Seriously. Okay. Let's talk about this. Let me just formulate my thoughts for a second. So sometimes when we date people, we start dating someone who's a little bit broken and a little bit busted. And sometimes they're a little bit clingy. And the neat thing about dating someone who's clingy is it's kind of like a very good complement to our own insecurities, right? So if I don't believe that I am worth dating, but I end up dating someone who's very, very clingy, their clinginess demonstrates to me how vital and important of a person I am, right? So like, y'all get that? It's kind of like, we'll see this a lot where people who are insecure at their core about their worth will actually date people who are very, very clingy. And so a relationship will start, and people are like not perfect when they start a relationship, right? Each of us has things that we're working on and stuff like that. And the relationship will develop particular dynamics. Like, for example, this person is clingy, I'm the support, and they need the support, and it's kind of like a one-way relationship. It gives me a sense of value. It also gives me a sense of security, because as long as this person needs me, then I don't have to worry about them leaving, right? As long as I can provide value and I can do something for them, right? So this goes back to the what have you done for me lately? As long as a person is clingy, they can't leave, and I can continue being a good partner, right? So that's kind of interesting, because that's what happens. And interestingly enough, we'll like find people who are clingy, and like you may wonder, like, why on earth are you dating someone who's so clingy? They're so clingy all the time. Doesn't that annoy you? And you're like, yeah, it annoys me, but you know, subconsciously, I really, really enjoy it because I don't have to worry about them leaving because they're incapable of functioning on their own. So I'm guaranteed a relationship, and I don't have to worry about being alone. Yeah, that happens. So then something often happens that is very, very terrifying. So sometimes we enter relationships, and a big part of that relationship is us wanting to help the other person, because this person is broken. And like, I want to help them. I love them. I want them to be independent. I want to help them get healthy. I want to help them become whole. I love them so much. And so you're going to like, you feel so good about yourself, right? Because this person is depressed. They're busted in some way. And there you are. They were in a car accident. They can't walk anymore. You're taking care of them. You're feeding them. You're cleaning for them. You're doing everything for them. And then they start to walk, and you're like, yeah, like I've done so. I'm like such a good human being. Look at me. And then they start getting better. And then they don't need you anymore. And then you kind of don't know what to do with that. Because I used to provide value for this person, right? And so if I'm insecure about myself, as long as I can continue providing value for them, they're going to stay in the relationship. But if I stop providing value, then why would they be in the relationship? They don't need to be here anymore. They've grown past me. And so it can be very, very hard as you support your partner, and your partner has the chance to stand on their own 2 feet and they no longer need your help. It can be a blow to you. It can be very difficult for you. What are you supposed to do now? How are you supposed to function? How are you supposed to handle it? Right? So it can be really hard. But here's the thing to understand about relationships. If you want to stay in a successful relationship, you have to understand that the relationship changes over time. So let's say I start dating someone and we're both 18 years old and we're about to go to college. Or let's say we started dating in high school. So we've been dating for 3 years, 15 to 18. And that relationship works in that way because we're 15, 16, 17, 18. And then when we go to college, that's different, right? We're going to grow as people. We're going to change as people. The interests that we have are going to change. Our work ethic may change. Some of us may get serious. Some of us may get more serious in terms of work ethic. Some of us may start partying way too much. So we'll change as human beings because human beings aren't static. And so it's kind of weird, but one of the biggest problems that people have in relationships is they try to hold on to an old relationship. Because this is when the relationship was great. It was so awesome 5 years ago before things changed. And I want to go back to that thing. But here's the thing to understand, that human beings change over time. It's a fact. And so if human beings change, relationships must change with them. And so this is a point where if your girlfriend is not clingy anymore, you may start to feel terrified. You may start to feel like she doesn't need you anymore. And sometimes she may not need you. And if the foundation of your relationship was her needs, and that foundation gets wiped away, then the relationship won't survive. Does that mean that she used you and you're resentful and all that kind of stuff? I'm not sure about any of that crap because you offered, right? So this is the other problem that we get into with relationships is when I become my partner's therapist, I have a dual relationship. So do they owe me romance if I am giving them therapy? And this is something that people do all the time without realizing it. They feel resentful because I'm giving you this and you're supposed to give me this in return, but it's not an even trade. I don't know that. In fact, I do know that romance is not an appropriate way to repay someone for therapy. Like that's actually inappropriate. So it can be very confusing as your partner no longer gets clingy. But this is where the relationship needs to adapt. It needs to change, right? Just like a seed becomes a shoot, and then a plant, and then a tree, and then has flowers, and then bears fruit, and those fruit have seeds of their own. The process of a relationship changes and metamorphoses over time. And if you want a relationship to work, you have to let it change. You can't let it be what it was. So now there were certain things about your partner that you really liked that you liked in spite of the clinginess, right? So the clinginess presumably is a bad thing. Maybe it's a good thing, whatever. But there have to be other things to your relationship besides the clinginess. So hopefully those things are still there. And now without the clinginess in the way, what can your relationship turn into now that your partner is independent? Can they start supporting you more, right? Can the support start to be 50-50? Because ideally, that's what it'll turn into. And that's what hopefully happens in these kind of successful relationships where you help your partner get back on their feet. And then hopefully the foundation of the relationship was not the dependence. Because if the foundation of the relationship was dependence, it doesn't mean the relationship is going to end. It just means you need a new foundation. And anytime you switch foundations, there's a chance that the relationship ends. So it can be a lot to process for sure. It can be very challenging. But I would start by, first of all, understanding what is confusing about it for you. Understand what your own feelings are. Understand what you want from the relationship. Understand how you feel threatened, if you do, by her lack of clinginess. And then have a conversation about it, right? Talk to your partner. Hey, I've noticed that when we first started dating, you were like, I would have described you as clingy. Would you say that's fair? And then, because you don't want to label something if she doesn't agree with it, and then say, like, I've really noticed that you've grown a lot in that way recently and that you've become a lot more independent. And hopefully you can be proud of that. So then you can authentically say, like, I'm really proud of you for, like, you've changed a lot. Like, you've become an adult. You've grown in so many amazing ways. Is it okay? And so you talk about that and sit with that. Doesn't have to be the same conversation. Then you can even share that it's weird, but I find myself being more insecure the more independent you become. Because there's a part of me that has always wondered, like, part of the reason you're with me is because I do, like, support you. And now if you don't need my support anymore, I've started to feel kind of confused about what's going to happen to our relationship. And I would just say that and see what your partner has to say. Because the whole point about a relationship is, like, you can try to navigate stuff up here, and this is a mistake that a lot of people make. They try to fix the relationship all internally, try to figure everything out. There's a whole other person involved. There's a whole another mind. There's a whole other set of feelings. And, like, enroll them in the process. That's the only way that the relationship is going to work. It can be scary when your partner is no longer clingy. It's one of the most attractive things for some people to have a clingy partner, because then I don't have to worry about them leaving, right? It can allay my own insecurities. And the cool thing about doing this and having that conversation is that you give your partner the opportunity to share with you why you are worth being in a relationship with, right? They can say, oh, like, now that I'm independent, like, yeah, I did need you before, but I actually, like, love it that I don't need you anymore. And I can enjoy your company without it being a need, without it being, like, transactional. Like, now I can appreciate you for who you are. And you're amazing. And, like, we have so much, like, and now I can start supporting you because you deserve support too. And I'd love to support you in the way that you supported me. And if that's what they say to you, like, that's going to feel amazing, right? That's when you learn that outside of what you provide for another person, you have value that they care about. It'll strengthen your relationship. Now, the tricky thing is that if you don't do this and you start being kind of manipulative and, like, you start, like, engendering some amount of clinginess on their part, or you start, like, pulling away in some weird way, like, if you never give them the opportunity to let them appreciate you, then you're never going to fix that insecurity to begin with. Because how does that insecurity get fixed? It gets fixed by them demonstrating their value. right? Them demonstrating your value to them. They can say, I think you have intrinsic value as a human being. Even though I don't need you anymore, I want to stay. And I'm staying in this relationship because I want to, not because I need to. And when your partner can say that to you, that's what's going to make you feel secure, because they're here because they want to be, not because they need to be. Because you're always wondering, are they here because they want to be, or because they're here because they need to be? If they were healthy, would they leave me behind? So that is that insecurity. And so sometimes what happens is we give into that so much without even realizing that we engender dependence on the part of our partner. Because we never want to be tested. We never want to give them the opportunity to leave because they could leave. What if she says, yeah, actually the reason that I've been less clingy and more independent is because I'm no longer interested in this relationship. And I've been recognizing that as part of like being able to leave this relationship in a healthy way, I need to be more independent. That could be what they could say too. But here's the thing. If that's what they're saying, like being a manipulative prick is not going to change that. You may be able to get them to stay for a little while, but if they're not invested in the relationship, you can try to manipulate them into staying and you may even succeed, but I don't think that's a relationship in which either of you will be happy. You may feel secure. You may feel some lack of loneliness, but you'll also feel resentment. You'll also feel stressed. It's not going to be a healthy relationship. So it's challenging. Make sense? It's common, very common, chat, to want to stay in a relationship with someone who's clingy. What is a healthy relationship? One that changes and adapts to the circumstances. Chivo2, hello, Dr. K. This is your first time in stream. Welcome, my friend. I'm glad our content is helpful to you. Can unconditional love be unhealthy? Let me think about that for a second. Sure. So I think unconditional love is not the problem. The problem is that people associate unconditional love with all kinds of unconditional other things, right? So what some people will do is they'll think that unconditional love means unconditional finances, means unconditional boundaries, means a complete absence of boundaries, means unconditional forgiveness, means unconditional second chances. The problem with unconditional love, I think, is generally speaking a good thing. I don't think you should stop loving someone. But the problem is that we squeeze in a lot of stuff to unconditional love, like financial support and complete tolerance and no lack of boundaries. And I think that's what's unhealthy. And so this is where it's confusing for a lot of people. But if you ever hear the phrase, "If you loved me, you would ... That phrase is a friggin' trap. If you loved me, if you really loved me, you would do this for me. One of the most manipulative phrases ever. Love and whatever that other thing is, the reason that you're not using the same damn word for both of those things is because those things are different. Right? If you loved me unconditionally, you would love me unconditionally. Yes, you are correct. That is correct. If you loved me unconditionally, you would pay for whatever I wanted. Disagree. It's the tying of the two things, right? And that's where unconditional love gets into trouble. Because what gets unhealthy about it, I don't think is the love, it's the other stuff. And so if you find yourself making those kinds of statements or thinking those kinds of thoughts, I encourage you to think a little bit about why you tie those two things together. Because last time I checked, love and money are two very different things. Love and forgiveness are also two very different things. Right? If someone does something bad to me, I can forgive them without loving them. Like, clearly, it's possible. And so love without forgiveness is also possible as well. And so be super careful about what you interpret as love or what love means to you. And this is where this kind of introspection can help people a lot. Because oftentimes what you'll discover is that in your upbringing, people have a particular love language. What was the demonstration of love? What does love mean to you? Oh, like my parents would get each other very, very expensive gifts for their birthdays and their anniversary. And there was a large material component to love that I saw in my household. Therefore, when I get really, really upset and I think that my partner doesn't love me because they didn't spend 10 grand on my birthday, I feel unloved. Like, look into that, right? Introspect, understand where that comes from. But generally speaking, I don't think that unconditional love is that unhealthy, but it can sort of become unhealthy if you start attaching other things to the love. Right? Okay. I think we're going to wrap for today. Who are we rating, chat? And we'll talk about Steel Mage. Who's Steel Mage? Let me just check. What is this? Path of Exile. Y'all want to watch PoE? Or Official Boaster? Mr. Llama SC. Okay, what is this? Is this Valorant? What do y'all want? Valorant or? Is there a... Dude, ESL... I'm going to watch some ESL when I'm done, but... Okay, we can do Steel Mage. Okay. Well, one of them's smaller. So let's do Official Boaster. Who's Llama? I'm still catching up from today, so I have to watch. I'm still finishing the Tundra versus Spirit series, and I'm going to raid right now before someone spoils it for me. I'm not even going to look at chat. I can't read chat anymore. I'm not even looking at chat. No, chat, don't do it. Okay, couple of announcements before we go as we're rating. Oh, God. I can't interact with you anymore. So mental health, exclamation point MHM in chat gives you the link for everything that we're doing for Mental Health May. All subs and donations and stuff go to the Healthy Gamer Foundation. I'm not looking, chat. You're not going to spoil it for me. A couple of important things about Discord events. So we've got a sleeping event. Lectures are every Tuesday at 9 a.m. if you guys want to get your sleep schedule in order. A clean your room event. So there's dedicated hours Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. The schedule's in Discord. We have Study Together, which is bot-hosted lobbies. We've got events on career mindset and networking every Thursday and Friday. Check out Discord. And if you need help with career stuff, like y'all are trying to figure out how to get promoted, how to be more noticed at work, how to stand up for yourself, how to play politics, check out Career Coaching. It's live now, and it's going really, really well. And this is also where we pulled external expertise from Ethan Evans, who's was a VP at Amazon for many, many, many years, streams on Twitch. And so it's really awesome because it's sort of like the internal mental component of understanding your cognitive biases, plus his experience of how to succeed at work. So check that out and take care. And I have 6 seconds, so I got to go. No spoilers.